If you've missed any portion of the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
The PMA is trying to divide us. They're using lies and tactics against us and turn locals against the negotiating committee and the rank and file against each other. Nobody divides the ILWU. Nobody. We're going to win this fight. We're going to win this battle, but there's only going to be one way to do it, and that's to stick together and stay strong and stay united.
ILWU President Robert McElrath. President Obama has directed Labor Secretary Tom Perez to help mediate the West Coast ports' labor talks. The union has been without a contract for months. For the past several days, the Pacific Maritime Association has locked out ILWU members at 29 West Coast ports who could have been loading and unloading ships to help relieve the cargo congestion at the ports. McElrath says the union is determined to win a fair contract, and he urged dock workers to hold the line.
Stay strong, stay united, listen to your local officers, listen to your negotiating committee. Do not listen to superintendents on the job. Do not listen to PMA's bullshit. Stay united. Brothers and sisters, thank you. And an injury to one is an injury to all.
The United Steelworkers oil industry strike heads into another week as the union tries building international solidarity to augment the strike effort in the U.S. USW held a week of solidarity events in Europe, picketing Royal Dutch Shell and other oil industry facilities in the Netherlands. Big Oil may be trying to spin this as a grab for more money when oil prices are down, but United Steelworkers President Leo Gerard is quite clear about the real reason for the unfair labor practices strike against 11 U.S. oil refineries.
This issue is about the company's refusal to look at and bargain over safe working conditions. It's about making sure that we have a fatigue standard that they don't manipulate. We've got too many cases now where they ask the workers, imagine this, to work 14 or 16 days in a row in 12-hour shifts.
Wisconsin's Republican-controlled state government is taking more tax money out of public schools to pay for private school vouchers. School Choice Wisconsin, a corporate front group for the private charter school industry, now not only wants tax money funneled to private schools, the group wants Wisconsin school districts to divulge the information so it can use it in sales pitches to get students to leave public schools. One Wisconsin Now's Scott Ross says Wisconsin residents are already paying tens of millions of tax dollars every year for tuition for kids already attending private schools. Ross says the private school voucher industry is treating public school children and their personal information like commodities to be bought and sold. He says they're treating public schools as a resource to be looted.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. The thing down till right gone.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots of things to talk about. Education, and it's coming into standardized testing season. Now I think it's a good time to start educating parents on the ills of standardized testing and maybe begin a push and a movement of people saying enough is enough. scrap these tests and let's get something that's going to help our kids learn and help to educate them and not just beat them over the head with a stick. Also going to talk about the day 16 of the nationwide oil strike. United Steelworkers on strike for the 16th day. And as much as the mental mindset, maybe, it's about money, it's about safety. It's about people wanting to go home at the end of the day in the condition in which they showed up. I don't think that's unreasonable. But what's interesting to me is you see these companies increasingly pushing for deregulation, increasingly pushing for lack of oversight. No more. No, we don't want to let OSHA in. We don't want to let inspectors in. No. If you're desperate enough to work in these conditions and you don't want to quit, well, you should be stuck doing what you're doing. We got a lot to get to, but today's President's Day. And the question of who's your favorite president, kept popping up today as I was speaking with people. I got to be honest, I'm a little flustered, a little frustrated. Virtually everyone goes either George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. Who's your favorite president? Well, George Washington. Why? How do I know why? He was the first president. He chopped down a cherry tree with wooden teeth. I don't know. Or Abraham Lincoln, because he freed the slaves and everyone loves that. And I just, increasingly became, anybody else, can you name another president? And, on this day, on President's Day, we should be able to, at least formulate something of an opinion. That's why the good folks at the Washington Post put out a report or a news article that reported on a survey done by 162 members of the American Political Science Association. They went through and they ranked. These are the really smart people, 162 of them came together and decided who the best presidents were all the way down this nice list. And Abraham Lincoln was the top. So everyone who today said, Abe, yes, Abe, honest Abe, you get a pat on the back because evidently maybe the 162 members of the American Political Science Association, maybe they were the same way. Anyway, there was Abe, then there was George Washington, Franklin and Teddy Roosevelt, and Thomas Jefferson rounded out the top five. Personally, mine finished a respectable 15th. You also had in the top 10 there Harry Truman, Dwight David Eisenhower, and then Bill Clinton, Andrew Jackson, Woodrow Wilson. And Barack Obama finished 18th, just below George H.W. Bush. W didn't make the break. Sorry, no W. Probably somewhere down near the bottom. The worst presidents, according to the Post, obviously, James Buchanan, Warren G. Harding, Andrew Johnson, Franklin Pierce, and William Harrison. The presidents who had the shorter terms, they tended to do much worse on average. They also asked the question of who should be the next face on Mount Rushmore, and overwhelmingly, according to the respondents of the survey, Franklin Roosevelt, which you would have thought, with as many crazy. But wait a second, these are actually political scientists. Never mind. Franklin Roosevelt, they wanted his face up there as well, and only 5% of the respondents said Ronald Reagan. And I know all my crazy right-wing friends. Oh, we want Ronnie. No, you can't have him on the dime, and you got his name plastered all over a bunch of post offices. That's enough. Oddly enough, I didn't run into anyone today who said Ronald Reagan was their favorite president. Interestingly, everyone was either Abe Lincoln or George Washington. Now mine, like I said, was 15th, John Adams. And you go, oh, John Adams. Crazy, right wing. Yeah, well, kind of, yes. The guy who had the gall and the stones to stand up after the Boston Massacre and represent the soldiers who killed Tuckus Atticus. Or Crispus Attucks was his name. A black guy, oddly enough, killed in the Boston Massacre, basically kind of moved us towards the whole revolution. But anyway, it was Adams who defended the soldiers, and successfully, because he believed that every person has the right to counsel and the protection of innocence. That whole innocent until proven guilty thing. Yeah, he kind of believed that. And, I give the guy credit. I don't know that I disagree. I don't know that I agree with him in policy, but you got to love the courage. Imagine a lawyer stepping forward and defending one of the 9/11 hijackers and successfully defending one of them. Really. He assisted Thomas Jefferson in writing the Declaration of Independence and drafting it, putting it all together. While Jefferson and Adams were really bitter political rivals, interestingly enough, they were, later in their lives, the best of friends and died within hours of each other. In fact, the way the story goes is Adams actually wrote a letter, saying he's going to, he will expire and, his time is at hand, but at least Jefferson lives. And, that didn't last long either. But, here's the guy who was a diplomat to Europe, helped negotiate the peace treaty with Great Britain, nominated George Washington as president. He was obviously Washington's vice president for 8 years, 2 terms. In 1800, he nominated John Marshall to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So some good stuff there. 2 terms as vice president with George Washington, elected himself in 1796 as president, the second president of the United States. Problems, the Patriot Act of his day, signing the Alien and Sedition Act. He did a whole bunch of build-up for the quasi-war with France that fortunately didn't happen, I guess, to his credit. He was able to keep the country out of that. A lot of good stuff. Problem, the Alien and Sedition Acts, the whole locking up newspaper editors, the whole, we want cannons blowing off while I'm entering towns. That kind of stuff seems a lot really, really heavy-handed. But the reason he's my favorite, and it doesn't get any simpler than this. The very first time in the history of civilization, the history of the civilized world, that you had a bloodless exchange of ideological power. Understand, Adams and Jefferson were at the opposite political ends of the spectrum. It's like today's the Democrats and the Republicans. We don't think anything of it when Bill Clinton leaves the White House and George Bush takes over. We don't think anything of it when George Bush leaves the White House and Barack Obama takes over. Until John Adams, that was not the norm. That had not happened. You didn't have this bloodless ceding of power. And while John Adams did sneak out of town the night before, did walk away, he left and he relinquished control. And I think that set the basis for in my view, the entire American experience. This whole exceptional experiment that's made us great, that we don't have to kill each other in the streets when there's a shift in ideology and a shift in thought, that we're willing to do things and try things new. And I think that's extremely important to remember on this day, on President's Day. So my favorite president for that reason, if I had to pick a policy president, obviously it would be Franklin Delano Roosevelt, followed by Teddy Roosevelt, the trust buster. You go and you break up these big corporations and you bring back some of the power and control to the people. A lot of things about Teddy was not fond of, misogynist, basic. You could say a bunch of things that aren't very nice. But at the end of the day, about bringing power back to the people, conservation, thinking about, hey, maybe we should be destroying everything. And maybe we shouldn't be putting everything into the hands of the few. So I guess down that line, you go with John Adams won because, like I said, the ceding of power. Franklin Roosevelt, Teddy. And then you get into some of the grayer areas. Was Kennedy better than Johnson? Who knows? Eisenhower was, I thought, a very good president, although, you didn't do much to stop the military-industrial complex. But still, lots of things to talk about on the big day. And I just wish there was more discussion around really who and why instead of George Washington or Abe Lincoln, because those are the only ones we remember. Sad stuff. Anyway, I'd love to hear yours. If you've got a favorite president, I'd love to know why. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Congressman Brandon Boyle. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1883, marking the deadliest day in Illinois mining history at the time. 74 boys and men lost their lives digging for coal in the diamond mine disaster in Braidwood, Illinois. The Wilmington Coal and Manufacturing Company owned the mine. It was located in a marshy, low-lying area. At midday, the east side of the mine collapsed from the weight of the melting snow. The combination of melting snow and heavy rains flooded the mine. Those trapped below could not open the ventilation doors against the heavy weight of the water. 2 of those who lost their lives that day were just 13 years old. One miner, John Huber, recounted his experience. I rushed as fast as the nature of the passage would allow to where I thought my sons were at work, but found that they had gone. I then yelled at the top of my voice to the men near me and made as fast as I could for the air shaft, where I knew there was a ladder and I could get out. By this time, the water was up to my armpits, and I had a hard time to get up the shaft. When he finally escaped the mine, he learned his sons had not made it out. After the disaster, it took 7 steam pumps 38 days to remove enough water to attempt to rescue the bodies. Falling rocks and accumulation of gas made recovery work very dangerous. 46 of the dead were never recovered. In 1898, the United Mine Workers of America placed a memorial at the site. The diamond mine disaster was one tragic entry of many that plagued the mining industry. During the first 2 decades of the 20th century, mining claimed nearly 50,000 lives in the United States. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. In his recent request for an authorization for the use of military force against ISIS, President Obama expressed his opposition to engaging in, quote, another prolonged ground war in the Middle East, which he said is not in our national security interest. But if you listen to Fox News' Gretchen Carlson, you would think the president had said something else entirely. Here's how she distorted President Obama's claim that U.S. ground troops are not necessary to defeat ISIS.
Battling ISIS abroad, it's a war of words here at home over strategy and the use of American ground troops. The president may have more clarifying to do after saying that we have no national security interest in this fight, despite constant threats to American lives, like Kayla Mueller.
Carlson continued.
What did President Obama mean yesterday when he said that it's not in our interest to defeat ISIL? Huh?
But the truth is that while Obama claimed that a prolonged ground war was, quote, not in our national security interest, he expressed that, quote, our core objective is to destroy ISIL. That doesn't sound like he said it's not in our interest to defeat ISIL to us. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
Your proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
You hurt my friends, then you hurt my pride. I gotta be a man, I can't let it slide. I am
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Bonnie sent me an email during the break saying, Bill Clinton is my favorite president. He passed the Family Medical Leave Act, on which I was able to spend a couple of months with my dying father. So Bill Clinton is my favorite. Look, I'm not a huge fan of Bill Clinton. He's in the top 10, according to the Political Science Association folks there, which are probably right about there. My problems with Clinton go to the Telecom Act, the Welfare Reform Act, NAFTA. You can name a bunch of other things, but definitely a feather in the cap of the former president is the Family Medical Leave Act. I just wish there was a paid component. So there's something for us to work for in the future. Anyway, here to talk about it, what's going on in Washington, D.C., first-term freshman congressman from the Philadelphia area, and also a fairly regular guest on this show when he was in the State House here in Pennsylvania. I've got Congressman Brendan Boyle. Congressman, thanks for taking time for us.
I really like the fact the lead into my segment was the Hulk Hogan theme song that I used to watch as a kid back 30 years ago. So bringing back memories.
Look, at the end of the day, the good thing doesn't die.
Yeah, I think the last time I heard that song was when I was watching wrestling as a kid 30 years ago. So I appreciate the flashback.
Whatever we can do to help. So it is President's Day. Bonnie's favorite president, obviously Bill Clinton, as she mentioned. Mine, John Adams, followed by FDR. Any favorites in your camp?
Well, the ones that everyone picks in terms of Lincoln saving the Union and George Washington, who had the incredible humility to turn down literally being a king. And in fact, when you walk through the Capitol, you walk through the crypt, it is where he was supposed to have been buried, and he declined it and said, "Don't do that. That wouldn't be best for democracy," and just decided to be buried at home in Mount Vernon. But I will throw out one president who I doubt has been named and isn't my number one favorite, but is someone who I think is very underappreciated and starting to be rediscovered, and that's Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that we associate positively with government, whether it's Medicare or Civil Rights, Voting Rights Act, Higher Education Act, all of those things happened under Lyndon Johnson as president, and it's a shame that the Vietnam mistake sort of knocked all of that off the page, and he's immediately thought of because of Vietnam, but he was probably the most consequential president since Franklin Roosevelt.
No, I'm right there with you. And, I talk about his programs, other Great Society programs often, because as a kid growing up in the early 70s, I benefited from a lot of those programs. So, those are things that are easily forgotten because, as you point out, the Vietnam War. And I think as time goes along, I think, like a lot of presidents, he'll be some things will be brought up back about him.
Yeah, you saw that with even Harry Truman, who left office very unpopular, and then he was kind of rediscovered in the 90s when David McCullough wrote that book. So, if you like a president, he's unpopular at the moment, just wait 30 or 40 years. Eventually someone will rediscover him.
Yeah, I gotta wonder how long it's going to take for George Bush to make it to the top 10.
I think for George W. Bush, it might be 3 or 4 centuries.
Okay,
so,
that?
It's probably going to be, that one is going to be a much longer wait, I think, than others.
Well, here's the thing, and and looking at today being President's Day and talking about some of these founding figures in our country and some of the people who saved this country, and kind of bringing it to today. I often wonder what the founders, what the George Washingtons and the Thomas Jeffersons and the John Adams, and even Abraham Lincoln would think, seeing the political divide that we have in this country, and I think it was Monroe or Madison who talked about factions and Federalist 10 and us breaking up as a nation. I wonder what they would think of what they see what's going on in Washington and now places like Harrisburg today.
Well, funny enough, I thought about this actually on my swearing-in day, January 6th, and I was thinking about it maybe a little bit more optimistically. I was thinking that our founding fathers, if they could look back, if they could look forward and actually be there January 6th, 2015, and think, my God, what we created in Philadelphia 240 years ago is roughly being carried on and continuing. I think they would probably be pleasantly surprised about that and amazed. That's the positive aspect of it. I think on the negative front, they would be dismayed that political parties ended up arising and something that they worked to prevent. Although some of the founding fathers were still alive when that happened. Election of 1800 between your favorite president, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson, that was really the first election that includes the two forerunners of the modern political parties. So unfortunately, it only took about 15, 20 years after the founding fathers for those parties to emerge.
And us to break up and beginning to do, as Madison talked about, break up into factions. But, I see this splintering off where it just seems for so many. And now that you're in Washington, experiencing this stuff for the firsthand, is it as divisive as it appears on the 24-hour news cycle? I mean, is there anything being done across the aisle, or have we just divided up into separate camps and it's just about bombing the other side?
Now, here's the frustrating part for me is that, so for example, I was with Congressman Pat Meehan, who's a Republican from suburban Philadelphia. He represents a part of Montgomery County that isn't in my district. And he and I went together to a tour of former Willow Grove Air Base, which has been closed for 10 years now. And something relatively simple, the Department of Navy has been holding up for years and years and years, and the folks in eastern Montgomery County are enormously frustrated because they don't get a response. That's something that he and I were able to work on a bipartisan basis, and we've already actually gotten more progress in the last few weeks than they had the previous several years. But something like that, it got a little bit of attention, but it won't get nearly as much attention as the food fight. Or if he and I were to stood up at that press conference and screamed and yelled at one another, you can bet that would have been front page. So on a lot of issues behind the scenes, you actually do see progress and you do see things getting done. But the big ticket items, the ones that get most of the attention, that's where all the focus goes on, the kind of big ideological fight. So I think the answer is both things are actually happening at the same time.
Yeah, because there's so much that needs to be done, and my fear is we've lost so many opportunities to fix what we need to have fixed in this country. You drive over any bridge, you drive on any road, you look at our infrastructure, it's crumbling, and yet we're still heading towards a time where the very real possibility the Highway Trust Fund eventually goes bust, and we have no money to fix this stuff.
So this is actually a great example where having been in the State House before this provides a real advantage because, of course, I voted for, as did my brother, we were two of the decisive votes for the landmark highway transportation bill that, yes, ended up raising fees. But guess what? It was absolutely needed. Pennsylvania, more bridges structurally deficient than any other state in the country, and more miles of road in need of repair than any other state in the country. And that was a bill where you did have about 40 to 50 more pragmatic House Republicans buck the Tea Party and join with us and get that passed. Now we need to do exactly that same thing at the federal level, because May 31st, the trust fund completely goes empty. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill, and this politically will probably sound dumb. I'm one of 25 co-sponsors of a bill that would update our gas tax to what it should be in inflation-adjusted dollars. You do that one simple thing, now finally you have the money to invest in our nation's infrastructure. Roads, bridges, also water, sewer. These are the kind of things we need to do. We need to do it to rebuild America. And, oh, by the way, they create great jobs right here at home.
Yep.
If you're repairing a bridge in Somerset County, that's not a job you can outsource to China.
Hold on a second. We did bring in Chinese welders,
steel.
And Chinese steel to build the bridge out there in Oakland, and they claimed that there weren't enough welders here in the U.S. We had to bring in Chinese welders to weld the substandard steel that they brought in, and that bridge still isn't completely functional. And I doubt it makes it to the 50 years that they were hoping it'd make.
That's a good point. It shows you why when we're passing these things, it's important, especially for those of us who come from the pro-labor side, to insist that there are labor standards and to stand up for organized labor. So make sure that those jobs that are intended to be American jobs actually are.
Exactly. Because I look at this and my fear is we've missed the boat on this. This is something we should have been doing 5-6 years ago. But the thing that's really troubling is, with the gas tax, and I'm in favor of doing what you've said. I'm in favor of the idea of adjusting it to inflation so that it continually goes up, so that people who drive end up paying the real cost of it. Because I think for too long we've propped up auto travel, we've propped up, lowering the cost of oil at the expense of public transportation, and what we've done is we've created this weird disincentive for people to continually drive and then live off of not investing in our roads, and now we've got both systems that are crumbled.
Right, there's no question about that. The statistics completely bear out what you said, and yet amazingly, when I was in the State House and stood up and said largely the same thing, you had people like Daryl Metcalf and the Tea Party folks who thought that we were in no way subsidizing road travel, and he actually labeled public transportation welfare, which is remarkable if you were to come to the Philadelphia area and see how many suburbanites who clearly are not on welfare are using our mass transit system and using our buses and using our regional rail. Unfortunately, there's this sort of mindset from a very conservative, and this is where things I think are different from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. You have this element in the Republican Party, it's kind of the Ted Cruz types that are so extreme that they don't believe in compromise. They don't believe in doing anything. They actually are working to destroy the system. They're not the majority of the Republican caucus, but the problem is leaders like Boehner, for example, are so afraid of going against them and bucking them that it does lead to paralysis.
And the thing that's really troubling about this is, this is what they tell their constituents they're going to do, and people vote for them. That's the scary thing with me, Congressman, is that, these politicians, some of them get up there and say, we don't believe in government. Government can't do anything. Oh, by the way, vote for me and I'll prove it to you.
Yeah, I'm still amazed that Rick Scott in Florida and Sam Brownback in Kansas got reelected after they actually did some of the crazy stuff that they campaigned on and talked about. They did those things. They're deeply unpopular, and yet they were still somehow able to get reelected. It's just
how much of that, Brendan? How much of that is that honestly the Democratic Party hasn't given people a solid platform? And now, one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about is Philadelphia has been named the host city for the 2016 Democratic National Convention, and the hope is that what comes out of that convention is a much clearer message of what Democrats stand for. When you talk to Republicans, they even if it's the wrong ideology, they know what they think they believe: smaller government, lower taxes, deregulation. Right. That's their message. Bang, bang, bang. Democrats seem to have a much more difficult message to explain.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I'm someone who, my career shows this. I campaigned for Congress on it. I would like to see the Democratic platform in 2016 reflect, frankly, what has been labeled a more populist stance on a number of economic issues to once again reconnect with working class Americans. I think that the real deficit over the last 10, 20 years is the way our party has hemorrhaged votes among working Americans. And that is a great opportunity for us to gain. And I want to make sure that as part of our primary process, I want to make sure that that part of our party is strongly represented. I think it's not only right on policy, I also think it's good politics.
Yeah, the party that creates jobs, the party that says we're going to invest in roads and bridges, and we're going to make sure that those jobs that are created pay a prevailing wage so that workers locally get those jobs and that money reverberates through the economy so everybody has some activity in it, and then be the party of education, be the party of fairness. At the end of the day, we have become a country of what John Edwards talked about in 2004, the two Americas. We have really split into those two Americas.
And I think his message was incredibly powerful. I believe that should be our party's message. He obviously, for other reasons, was not the perfect messenger for that. But I do think whether it's Elizabeth Warren, whether it's Jim Webb, whether it's someone we don't even know, someone runs for president and communicates that message, they're going to do extremely well. And even if they're not the nominee, I think they're going to make sure that the Democratic nominee is someone who can speak convincingly and persuasive about these issues and not just watered down Reaganomics.
Yeah, my hope is we had Bernie Sanders on the program week before last, and I think he's got the absolute right message. At the end of the day, there's got to be somebody who's not just going to speak rhetoric to the working class of this country, but actually roll up his sleeves and, if need be, go to Dukes over it.
Both sides, I think both parties are going to have a pretty vigorous debate. The Republican side, obviously, you have about 24 people running for president, so it's almost inevitable. But even on the Democratic side, I think you're going to see in both parties, and I hope this is the case because I think it's healthy for democracy, you'll see real debates within both parties and what they stand for. On the Republican side, I think that, they're torn between two different visions of foreign policy that kind of, one is a more isolationist and the other is a more traditional Reagan anti-communist type vision. So they, I think, are all over the map. Even though they're more unified when it comes to economic policy, they're kind of all over the map when it comes to foreign policy. I think that sort of a debate will be good for the country. I think you'll see it on the Democratic side too.
Yeah, I hope so. Last line of questioning. Philadelphia has been named the host city of the DNC.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing? My first thought was, how much is it going to cost the city to get the convention there? We could probably use that money for education or something else.
No, it's actually a great thing. There's a reason why a lot of cities, unlike the Olympics, which tends to be an economic loser, even though there's a prestige about it, frankly, every city has lost money hosting the Olympics going back 30 years. Hosting either one of the political conventions is different. With the federal money that brings because of investing in security, there already now is, speaking of infrastructure projects that there will now be funding for that without getting the convention would not have happened. So the analysis is that it's an economic driver of anywhere from $350 to $400 million. And we've experienced of hosting the Republican convention in 2000, which was a big boon to the city. So it's for anyone in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, even if you're not a Democrat, hosting one of the political conventions is actually a win and something that is just smart that you want to do. And then beyond that, as a Democrat, I think hosting it literally in the nation's birthplace and talking about what we stand for as a meritocracy, that if you work hard, play by the rules, you should have the opportunity to move ahead, that your lot in life shouldn't be determined by how much or how little your parents have or your rank in birth, but that it should be based on how hard you work. I think that those are the kind of values that we as a party need to closely identify, and holding the convention in Philadelphia, right where it all began, is to me the perfect place.
There you go. Congressman, I appreciate you taking time for us. Congratulations again on all the work you're doing there. And I'd love to have you come back on and talk to us again as things continue down the road.
All right, sounds good. Talk soon, Rick.
Thanks so much, Congressman Brendan Boyle. If you want to check out his website, boyle.house.gov, we got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
This week, the House will continue to focus on the people's priorities.
11th time's the charm. Republicans pass Keystone Pipeline bill again.
The magnitude of this deal is very, very big.
Apple invests big in solar.
It feels like we're under assault by Mother Nature.
Record snow in Boston, with more on the way.
State records reveal some disturbing news about California's drinking water.
Oil companies dumping toxic waste into California's aquifers. Plus,
estimates are that the monarch butterfly population has decreased 90% since the 1990s.
Uncle Sam wants you to help save the monarch butterfly.
All of those desperate pleas and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Even the president's own State Department will say that it creates 42,000 new jobs.
No, Mr. Speaker, the State Department doesn't say that.
But instead of listening to people, the president's standing with a bunch of left fringe extremists and anarchists.
Anarchists?
The president needs to listen to the American people and say, yes, let's build the Keystone Pipeline.
Actually, it's only a minority of Americans that want to build the Keystone XL pipeline, but whatever. You know how those anarchists are. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, just to clear up a fact here, the State Department did not find that the Keystone XL pipeline would create 42,000 new jobs. But to be fair, it did find that it would create 34 new jobs. So Speaker John Boehner is only off by about 41,900 and something.
Yeah, he's fudging the numbers
Just a little, you think?
Yeah.
But then again, you're an extreme leftist or an anarchist. So what do you know?
Well, I do know that the House of Representatives passed the Senate's Keystone XL pipeline bill on Wednesday to force approval of the controversial pipeline from Canada. 29 Democrats in the House voted yes. One Republican, Justin Amash of Michigan, voted no.
Why did he vote no?
He said he's against special legislation for one private company to bypass the regulatory process.
Good for Congressman Amash. A little bit of intellectual honesty there. Appreciated.
Doesn't matter because President Obama has still promised to veto, and they still don't have enough votes to override that. Meanwhile, renewable energy is booming in the good, not explosive kind of way. Apple Computer CEO Tim Cook announced this week that Apple is investing $850 million to build a massive new solar farm. It's part of the company's goal to be 100% powered by renewable sources. All of Apple's data centers are already powered by renewables. Historic snowfall across the Boston area from a freight train of extreme storms with another on the way is straining the city's infrastructure and blowing a hole in its budget.
I've never seen anything like it. They're calling it Stormageddon, and it feels like we're under assault by Mother Nature.
Boston has received twice its average snowfall in just the past 3 weeks alone, and removing all that polluted snow is costing the city money. Some can be dumped in the ocean, but officials are now preparing for flooding when it melts. Boston's just the latest American city to discover it is not ready to deal with these extreme weather events. And in fact, a Department of Homeland Security official testified at a Senate hearing this week that total economic losses from extreme weather events over the last 30 years have cost the U.S. $1.5 trillion with a T, dollars. Too bad Boston can't ship that snow to California or Alaska. In Alaska, lack of snow has forced the Iditarod sled dog race to move its route for only the second time in over 40 years. And across the West, record warm winter temperatures are waking up grizzly bears early from their winter hibernation, according to rangers in Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. And in California, where the state is heading into its fourth year of historic drought, an AP investigation has found not only did California state regulators allow oil companies to inject production fluids and wastewater into federally protected aquifers, they allowed it more than 2,500 times.
They're injecting wastewater right beside an area where a farmer is pumping up irrigation water.
State officials say there's no evidence that water wells have been contaminated, but they have acknowledged the mistake and have begun shutting down some of those wells. Finally, monarch butterfly populations in North America have dropped 90% due to the exponential increase in the use of herbicides by farmers over the last 20 years. That's killed off milkweed, the monarch's food source. But good news, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wants your help.
We can make habitat for the monarch butterfly in backyards, in schoolyards, in city, county, state, and national parks. And the magic is that if we make the habitat, monarch butterflies will come.
So I'm just supposed to plant milkweed in my backyard?
Yeah, that is actually U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Director Dan Ash. It's a new $3 million habitat restoration program. They want everybody to plant milkweed from Texas to Minnesota.
Okay, do I get any of those $3 million?
No, you don't get $3 million for doing it.
Well, then I'll think about it. For much more on that story and the ones we couldn't get to this week, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on your public airwaves and plant some milkweed. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Butterflies are free.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Just like time to say your prayer while you're waiting for the hammer to fall.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Jana sent me an email. Her favorite president, Jimmy Carter. Interesting, because of the solar panels. But she went into a whole thing. And least favorite president, as she points out, Ronald Reagan, for taking the solar panels off. Love that. Andy sent me an email saying Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the greatest president. And look, I'm not going to argue with that. I think he was really, honestly and truthfully, the one of the greatest presidents. And as Andy points out, for giving his grandfather a job during the Great Depression as part of the Civil Conservation Corps. That grandpa could feed 6 kids, and those 6 kids can go on and then have other kids, and name one of them Andy, obviously. He also points out the New Deal, Social Security, World War II, and the no war is a racket backsheesh, as he says. The formulation of the SEC Act of 1933 and 34, saving people's homes and farms. And I guess Andy's favorite part of it is sticking it to the plutocrats, among other things. And look, there are a lot of accomplishments during those years, during the FDR years, that you could say shaped the entire what was left of the 20th century. What you've got now is you've got this whole pushback from the right wing, from Reagan forward, attempting to undo all of that. Because the Great Depression, there were people in the streets literally ripping this country apart brick by brick. They looked to their government to do something. And their government had better damn well do something, because the government before was basically you're on your own. And I got to wonder, and this is one of those things that, had we the Herbert Hoover today, had Bush said, you know what, screw it, we're doing nothing. And there had been no Social Security, no Social Security, no unemployment, no food stamps, none of that stuff in 2008 when the economy was in free fall. I wonder what would have happened in this country, because we were really right there. If it wasn't for government coming in and saying, hey, we're going to spend money to get the pump moving again, got to put some gas in the engine, where would we have been? If not for those Keynesian principles of, hey, let's prime the pump and get things moving, where would we have ended up? And what's interesting to me is you still have these Republicans out there, welfare people are just cheating the system, and not really caring about how much corporate welfare we give away. And what's frustrating to me is I look at this president, and I don't know where history is going to leave President Obama. I guess he's 18th right now. I don't know where history is going to leave him, in 20 years or 30 years. But I think he missed a really amazing opportunity to be one of the better presidents, because he came in at a time of crisis. He came in at a time of the nation looking for direction and leadership. And what we got was some very soft things that got done right away. The stimulus right from the start, and I'm not an economist, but I do understand if you don't do something enough, if you try and jumpstart your car with a 9-volt battery, it ain't happening. Sorry. You actually need a pretty sizable battery. Get that car started. That's what we tried to do. We tried to jumpstart the car with a 9-volt battery, and then we put another 9-volt in another, and eventually it started, but it's not running right. And that's kind of where we've been. I'm of the mindset, and always have been. I guess it's a personality thing, that if you need something, you go with the biggest tool you can get. Someone hits you with a feather, you hit them with a brick. You need a thumbtack, you put in a nail. That's just the mentality. You need a little bit more is always better. Just a thought. And you look at the stimulus, and it wasn't enough. Had we a much bigger stimulus, had we gone through and done some really bold things, I think this president would be remembered, and would right now be much higher in the list, and would be remembered as one of the bolder, greater presidents. I just don't see that happening, because there's nothing bold here. There's no, for me, public option minimum for the healthcare. He'll be remembered as the guy who brought us healthcare, but it was kind of weak. Had he brought us Medicare for all, bold. That had said a statement. Now, my problem, when they had the levers, they had everything. For the first 2 years, he had it all. Could have done anything. And it's amazing how Democrats don't really know how to wield the levers of power when they control them. The Republicans know exactly what to do. They will extend and they will overreach and they will do all of that stuff because they know this isn't going to last long. We need to get it all now. And we need to get everybody on board so we get it all now. They get that. But I just read this article from the Financial Times. And, I've been talking about this for a while, that we're missing a great opportunity. And this is because you've got a Republican Party hell-bent on no. Whatever the president says, the answer is always no. And really a political system that when one party brings up an idea, the other party automatically viscerally says, no, because it's your idea. Well, you can't have that idea. But this Financial Times article, well, let me just read the opening of it. Stephen Foley, the guy who writes it, he writes, it is possible economic historians will look back on this era with harsh criticism of how the U.S. missed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to upgrade its crumbling roads, pitiful public transportation, and failing schools. Capital markets, he writes, have never been as accommodating, nor have interest rates have ever been as low, or investors as keen to snap up long-term debt with above Treasury yields. Yet, while the amount of outstanding bonds issued by U.S. companies is 47% higher now than on the eve of the crisis of 2007, the size of the municipal bond market is just up 6%. So the corporations get it. The corporate risk takers, and it doesn't matter, the political party aside, this is about getting money. Corporate America goes, it's never going to be this cheap. We need to borrow as much as we can right now. Invest in plants, invest in whatever, and not even here so much. It doesn't matter. We're just borrowing this money. And I remember one of the railroads, they were able to borrow $250 million. This is a couple of years back, $250 million for 100 years. And I'm going, who exactly lends money for 100 years? They know they're obviously going to be good for it, but they knew never going to be this low again. We might as well get it. It's almost free. In fact, there was a point at which, there were countries around the world who were saying, please take our money just so we don't lose anything. Take it for free. Here, take it. We just don't want it to lose money. And we could have rebuilt by now. I mean, we could have had this amazing economic boom if you would have just borrowed for infrastructure and put that money into, hiring jobs, making government as employer of the last resort, roads, bridges, broadband access, waterways, all of the sewer lines, all of that stuff. We could have upgraded all of that stuff and borrowed money at nothing to do it. Yet we didn't. Why? Political idiocy. The numbskulls that lead the Republican Party go, no, we need balanced budgets. We can't borrow money. We're broke. No, ding-dongs. Now is exactly when you borrow money. Because look, as the economy recovers and interest rates go up, every time that interest rate ticks up a little bit, the cost of replacing that sewer line that's eventually going to turn into a sinkhole, that gets more expensive. The cost of repairing the road that goes through your town, the more the interest rates go up, the more costly that road becomes. You don't need to be a genius to figure this out. You don't need an economics degree. You don't need to have a crystal ball. You need to know that money was basically free a couple years ago. Now, the rates are still historically low. Still can take advantage of it. According to the article, there's great opportunities. Question is will we? And, one of the reasons I asked Congressman Boyle, what was going on there in Washington, is it as dysfunctional in its inner workings as it appears on the outside? Now, look, I expect two politicians from Philadelphia to go and have a kumbaya, hold their hands moment and talking about getting something to come back to Philadelphia. I expect that. But, the other stuff, the other inner workings behind the scenes, I'm not left with any warm, fuzzy feeling. There's no happiness here, because every day we wait, every month we wait, every 6 months we wait, that rate keeps ticking up and ticking up and ticking up. And you know what that means? That means we are going to pay more. Our kids are going to have less because we waited. And this is just dumb to me. This is where past generations would have gone, opportunity. This is where those people who say we should run government like a business, where the hell are you? Because business is borrowing like crazy. Why? It's cheap. We can, even if we just hold that money in a year, 2, 3, 5, when it turns around, we have a glut of it. I mean, stop and think about our pension situation here. We could have easily issued a bond at a very low rate and undone all of those problems. And then over the next, 30, 40, 50 years, we could have paid it back. And when the interest rates skyrocket, you go, well, hey, we're still paying this interest rate. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. What it takes are statesmen to sit down and put their political divides aside and go, this isn't a bad idea. Investing in repairing our nation, investing in making sure that our schools are not, when the kids are in class and it's snowing, that there's not snow in the classroom, that they have books, that this doesn't take a genius. And what's frustrating to me is that, there's so many opportunities to get this economy jump-started. But what's sad, and as I think Brendan Boyle pointed out, here at the end of May, the trust fund goes boom. Boom. Nothing. There's nothing left. So what happens? Now, again, the Republicans love taking us to that moment of crisis, to where then they can extract their pound of flesh. And what does that mean? Does that mean lower wages for workers? Does that mean the Keystone Pipeline XL project that they seem to have a fetish over? I mean, is this what it leads us to? Instead of just saying, you know what, there's some really great opportunities. Now, on the municipal level, there have been, on the state and municipal level, there have been a number of instances, as Foley points out in his Financial Times article, where states have taken advantage of some bond issues, some bond measures. California, the voters there approved a $7.5 billion investment in their water infrastructure. The governor, just I guess a couple weeks ago said, Jerry Brown said, making repairs to the roads and bridges. That's a priority in this term. New York authorized a $2 billion bond to fund technology upgrades for their schools. About time. But the problem, as they point out, is that these are just isolated instances. There's not enough of this going on. And, while we're continually worrying about budget holes and continually going, oh, there's a pension crisis, let's destroy the pensions, there's an opportunity for us to borrow some of this money and put it to use. But I guess my question is will we? And honestly and truthfully, I think that's been answered over the last couple of years. The answer is no. And understand, I think as any rational, thoughtful person will, as the economy turns around, as the unemployment number comes down, be it the official number that's pathetically low, or the actual number, and you have more people back into the workforce, eventually interest rates go back up. I was watching a movie last night with my wife and my kids, and at one point they said, the interest rate for the loan for our mortgage was 9%, and I'm going 9%. How old is this movie? But we know eventually it gets back to that point. And then if you have to borrow to fix these problems, you then have really costly problems. And that's a huge problem. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, the first hour, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. Get the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone, take the program on the go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
End up like a dog that's been beat to
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
The PMA is trying to divide us. They're using lies and tactics to turn the public against us and turn locals against the negotiating committee and the rank and file against each other. Nobody divides the ILWU. Nobody. We're going to win this fight. We're going to win this battle, but there's only going to be one way to do it, and that's to stick together and stay strong and stay united.
ILWU President Robert McElrath. President Obama has directed Labor Secretary Tom Perez to help mediate the West Coast ports' labor talks. The union has been without a contract for months. For the past several days, the Pacific Maritime Association has locked out ILWU members at 29 West Coast ports who could have been loading and unloading ships to help relieve the cargo congestion at the ports. McElrath says the union is determined to win a fair contract, and he urged dock workers to hold the line.
Stay strong, stay united, listen to your local officers, listen to your negotiating committee. Do not listen to superintendents on the job. Do not listen to PMA's bullshit. Stay united. Brothers and sisters, thank you. And an injury to one is an injury to all.
The United Steelworkers oil industry strike heads into another week as the union tries building international solidarity to augment the strike effort in the U.S. USW held a week of solidarity events in Europe, picketing Royal Dutch Shell and other oil industry facilities in the Netherlands. Big Oil may be trying to spin this as a grab for more money when oil prices are down, but United Steelworkers President Leo Gerard is quite clear about the real reason for the unfair labor practices strike against 11 U.S. oil refineries.
This issue is about the company's refusal to look at and bargain over safe working conditions, about making sure that we have a fatigue standard that they don't manipulate. We've got too many cases now where they ask the workers, imagine this, to work 14 or 16 days in a row in 12-hour shifts.
Wisconsin's Republican-controlled state government is taking more tax money out of public schools to pay for private school vouchers. School Choice Wisconsin, a corporate front group for the private charter school industry, now not only wants tax money funneled to private schools, the group wants Wisconsin school districts to divulge the information so it can use it in sales pitches to get students to leave public schools. One Wisconsin Now's Scott Ross says Wisconsin residents are already paying tens of millions of tax dollars every year for tuition for kids already attending private schools. Ross says the private school voucher industry is treating public school children and their personal information like commodities to be bought and sold. He says they're treating public schools as a resource to be looted.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
Equality is in play. Workers should organize without haste. Have the vote in your workplace. Work with your manager face to face. Let's go! It's starting again.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So day 16 of the nationwide strike. And it should just be called the strike for safety because, every person I talk to says, look, this is about making sure that things don't go boom. And look, we spent during our People's Tour for America, when we did our cross-country labor history tour, we stopped in West Texas. And I stood on the ground where there was a 93-foot around, 10 feet deep hole in the ground because the company was holding 30,000 tons of ammonium nitrate. In wooden boxes in a wooden shed in the Texas heat with no sprinkler system. What could possibly go wrong? And when it went boom, there are tons of pictures that show what happened when it went boom. And I remember standing on that ground looking at the school that the whole backside of it was blown out, looking at the nursing home across the street that the whole corner of it was gone. The houses all throughout the neighborhood gone. And when the Attorney General of Texas said, well, we don't need regulations. If you want to know what's in there, just go knock on the door and ask. I don't get a warm, fuzzy feeling about that. And I got to tell you, if I've got one of these plants in my area, I want to make sure that it's safe. And the best way to do that is at the workplace. So for me, this strike is extremely important, not just to keep the workers safe, but to keep the community safe. And here to talk a little bit about the strike and what's going on. I've asked Jim Savage. He's the president of United Steelworkers Local 10-1 down in the Philadelphia area. Jim, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on, Rick.
So I look at this, and, for me, the reason I find this interesting and important is it's not just about the workers. I think it's about the communities as well.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Ultimately, whatever permits or licenses companies get, the true license to operate comes from the communities within which we operate.
And maybe you don't have an illegal amount of something that should be stored in a much better way than 30 tons, 60,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate in wooden boxes in a wooden shed with no sprinkler system. I got to think if you had a union at that place, and I've asked this before to people, you got to think that the workers would have gone, there's something wrong with that. Maybe we should sit at the bargaining table and talk about it.
Absolutely. I mean, there's certainly nothing that flagrant going on in any union refineries, but the problems we do see, we've tried for several rounds to get them addressed. Nothing but broken promises from this industry, and we got tired of that. We said enough is enough, and here we are.
So walk me through this day 16. How'd this all start?
Well, our 3-year agreement was coming up on February 1st. We, every oil local sent delegates to a conference back in October. And we had a serious discussion, 300 people, and we approved a very lean, what we thought was reasonable and achievable agenda. And it was completely focused on the health and safety of our members and the communities in which we operate. And that's fatigue, worker fatigue, staffing, which is tied into the fatigue, contracting of work and training of our maintenance personnel. And then, our healthcare costs. That was really the big issues. Typically we go in there with 12 or 15 different proposals. We went in there with 4 proposals this time. We're satisfied. We're not. This is not about economics, right? If we can fix the rest of the stuff, if we can get some gains and some promises and some enforceable language from this industry on the health and safety stuff, we'll figure the economics out. Right.
So it's not about the money. It's about all the other stuff. Explain to me the fatigue angle. Look, I drove a truck for years. I get it. You work 70 hours a week, every week, 52 weeks a year, year after year after year, your body breaks down. You get tired. You need a break. Tell me what's going on in the industry as you talk about fatigue.
They're running so lean right now. Fatigue sort of came up as a national issue after the Texas City explosion in 2005. 15 people died, and one of the contributing factors that was identified was the fatigue of the operators that were working in the plant at the time, and they were on a shutdown and they had worked 29 or something straight 12-hour days, and you reach a point where you start making poor decisions, right? Because your brain is tired, right?
Yeah, I mean, the poor decision is just after 29 days coming to work 12 hours a day. That to me would be the start of it.
That's right. So there was a long process on how to address that. We thought we had addressed it 3 years ago in our agreement, and the company sort of gamed that agreement to sort of manipulate overtime and then bang people out of, which eliminated people from getting a proper rest period. So if you had a 14-day limit and then you were required a 2-day rest, they'd take you out of service, on that 14th day, and then work you 13 more. So you were sort of on this perpetual 26 out of 27.
Well, let me ask you this before you go any further. Let me ask you this. Whatever happened to that 40-hour work week thing that we used to take such great pride in this country?
Yeah, well, that's what we'd like to know too, and certainly that's a big part of this, right? We're, like I said, we understand that we make pretty good money comparatively to the rest of the working class people out there.
Yeah, but if you're working 29 days, 12 hours a day, if you're working all of these days, all of this time, when do you spend it? You're going to be the richest. Right. You're going to be the richest guy in the grave.
Right. We'd like some opportunities to spend some time with our family and spend some of that money, right?
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to be the richest guy in the graveyard. Come on.
That's right. And then there's an exception process to this fatigue rule that the companies have just gamed beyond belief, and people are still working, as many days in a row. It's been one sort of outrage after another, and at some point, some states, including Pennsylvania, I think, have laws that nurses can only work so much forced overtime, because a tired nurse could kill somebody, right?
Exactly.
Well, a tired refinery operator can kill
a bunch of
a
people.
whole lot of people. That's right.
Yeah. So, and I got to be honest, from a business standpoint, I don't know why I would want Jim Savage or anybody working that many hours, that many days, because productivity, studies have been shown that productivity drops off significantly after 40 hours. And when you get into the 50s and 60s, it's almost non-existent. So it's one of these things where, from a corporate, a good capitalist standpoint, why would I want somebody who's not at their peak of productivity?
I've said it a million times. I can't believe that we've been forced into a strike. I said earlier in our conversation, we came in with a very lean agenda, and we thought they were reasonable and achievable goals. And any responsible company would have looked at the proposals that we brought forward, and hey, maybe they're not going to say, we like it the way you wrote it, we'll do it, right? But through a process of collective bargaining, they should have been able to take a look at that and say, this is something that should be important to both parties, and we can find our way through this to get something that's workable. And I just can't believe that we're in this situation.
So let me ask you the next question that I'm sure everybody's asking now. Since you put it that way, is this something that was going to happen no matter what? Was this what the company wants?
Well, I think that they didn't think we'd do it. Whether they want it or not, I guess you'd have to ask them if you could ever get an honest answer out of them about anything. But I think that they just thought that we wouldn't do it. That eventually we would just at the end say, okay, we're not gonna push this any further. But like I said, we've had enough of this, enough broken promises. We need something that create some obligations, some reasonable obligations, and a way for us to enforce it. And we're going to be in this. We're in this now till we get that.
Yeah, and I understand right now there's a statement that the strike's not going to grow any larger to bring any more refineries in, but that's always a possibility down the road, correct?
I don't know where you saw that statement, because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm guaranteeing you that if this continues, that the strike will grow larger.
No, what I saw is, as of last Friday, the steelworkers reported that no new strike notices had been issued, and that they were going to be talking. That's the report that I saw.
Yeah, right. On that, and just on that day, the context of this, and what I'm letting you know is, we could cancel 24-hour rolling extensions at any time, right? And if the industry doesn't get serious, this thing will absolutely grow. We have 11 locals at 9 different facilities right now that are on strike, and either they get serious or that number will grow.
Are they talking right now? I mean, are the negotiations going on today? Is this something that you foresee continue, or are we in this for the long haul, you think?
Negotiations, nobody's met face to face today. I'm leaving first thing in the morning for Houston to meet the rest of the week to continue the negotiations. But we're in it for the long haul. If that's what they want, we can resolve this Wednesday morning when they walk in the room if they want. This really is up to them.
Yeah, I mean, because to me, just looking at it from a business standpoint, and maybe even as a community standpoint, because I got to imagine in the communities where these refineries are, the people have got to be concerned that, there's a guy there working, 12 hours a day, 20, 30 days in a row, or whatever it is. I know these instances are infrequent, but when they happen, they're extremely dangerous, and that could be me and my kids. Let alone the workers. It could be my neighborhood.
That's exactly right, and the workers in these plants live in those communities, right? The CEOs and the board of directors, they fly in every quarter for a meeting or whatever. The workers in these plants, we breathe the air that around those plants. We're affected by all that, just like our neighbors. So, we take it very seriously. It's a huge responsibility that we do take seriously. We want to operate these plants safely, environmentally sound. We want to be good neighbors. They just have to create the conditions that allow us to do that.
Yeah, and personally, I can't believe there isn't a law against. I mean, truck drivers have laws, nurses have laws, as you pointed out. I can't believe someone in an industry that could have that kind of an impact doesn't already have some laws in place to protect the workers and to protect the communities. Because I look at what happened in West. That should never be allowed to happen. And as you pointed out, in union places, it doesn't happen to that extent. But there are things that go on that I can't believe there aren't any laws for.
Well, maybe it's time.
There you go. Jim, I would love to hear back from you as the negotiations continue down the road. And if there are any developments, I'd love to have you let us know.
All right, Rick. Good luck to you, man. Keep up the good work.
Thanks so much, Jim Savage, president of Steelworkers Local 10-1. You want to check out more information about them? Just go to thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Jim Savage's name. Take you right there. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Bills are creeping through the door. It's desperate times, so desperate measures we explore. Marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out, "Where's our government?" Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Profit billions off our back, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money, we work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations, it's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thoughts are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1883, marking the deadliest day in Illinois mining history at the time. 74 boys and men lost their lives digging for coal in the diamond mine disaster in Braidwood, Illinois. The Wilmington Coal and Manufacturing Company owned the mine. It was located in a marshy, low-lying area. At midday, the east side of the mine collapsed from the weight of the melting snow. The combination of melting snow and heavy rains flooded the mine. Those trapped below could not open the ventilation doors against the heavy weight of the water. 2 of those who lost their lives that day were just 13 years old. One miner, John Huber, recounted his experience. "I rushed as fast as the nature of the passage would allow to where I thought my sons were at work, but found that they had gone. I then yelled at the top of my voice to the men near me and made as fast as I could for the air shaft, where I knew there was a ladder and I could get out. By this time, the water was up to my armpits, and I had a hard time to get up the shaft." When he finally escaped the mine, he learned his sons had not made it out. After the disaster, it took 7 steam pumps 38 days to remove enough water to attempt to rescue the bodies. Falling rocks and accumulation of gas made recovery work very dangerous. 46 of the dead were never recovered. In 1898, the United Mine Workers of America placed a memorial at the site. The diamond mine disaster was one tragic entry of many that plagued the mining industry. During the first 2 decades of the 20th century, mining claimed nearly 50,000 lives in the United States. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
So you want to get in the whiskey business, do you? Well, you'd better study Mr. Daniel and his loyal family's success. It's not easy setting up a distillery, making quality whiskey, and marketing the product for a profit. But plenty of people have tried because those products and profits can both be mighty fine. The best case study of any distiller's long road through politics and regulations is the story of the Jack Daniel family. Mr. Jasper Newton Daniel was born in Lynchburg, Tennessee, and was nicknamed Jack as a young child. You'll find conflicting information and colorful tales proven false in Mr. Daniel's history, including his birthday. His biographer concludes it was in January of 1849. Jack's father died in the Civil War and his mother had passed before. Thus, he was orphaned as a teenager. But join us again as Preacher McCann takes him in. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Just when you thought it was safe, those crazy Republicans are at it again. It's time for the Rick Smith Show's Conservative Alerts.
There's been a time or two, there has, where I have misstated something, where I've said, well, I meant to say this, it actually came out as this, but I don't think I've ever had one of those moments where I've completely and totally boogered something up, like this Congressman Paul Gosar, the Republican from Arizona. He was, doing his little song and dance on CNN. I guess this was last Tuesday. It was where he was, talking about, we shouldn't be paying terrorists, ransom money, because he pointed out, he said, if we were to do that, then every American citizen traveling abroad becomes the subject in regard for kidnapping, and then the plight of how much money has been captivated in the Boca Raton group. And I'm going, Boca Raton? Are there a bunch of old people with their canes coming after me? Now, obviously, he screwed up and he said Boca Raton instead of Boca Haram. But it's kind of funny because then the mayor of Boca Raton, came out with a statement saying, hey, while I'm glad to hear this congressman's got our quiet little city, on the tip of his lips, he says, I'm disappointed that he would confuse our vibrant, beautiful city with a movement promoting Islamic insurgency in Nigeria. And I got a question, if the good congressman, if he even knew it was in Nigeria. Just a thought. So, hey, a little slip of the tongue. Then in good humor, and I got to give the guy credit, in good humor, he then put on his website that all is safe. They have taken care of the problem, and all is now safe in Boca Raton, and a whole little spiel. But again, it's interesting that he screwed that up. And on Friday, his office, issued a news release saying that the congressman had been awake for almost 24 hours and had given many interviews that day. Here's an idea: don't do it. Pretty simple. Another one of those moments, and I give that guy a pass, as you should. He just made a little slip of the tongue. It was what it was. My problem is you've got people who deliberately make stuff up. And a guy who wants to be president, I look at Rand Paul, who evidently was attending the Lincoln Labs Reboot Congress conference on February 12th. And he claimed not once, but twice to have a biology degree and an English degree. Now, to be fair to him and to lay the boundaries, he did go to Baylor University. He did take classes in biology and English. Never graduated, though. And this is the weird little thing where I guess maybe you can go saying I have a biology and an English degree is something that you could get away with, although I don't think so. He does have a medical degree, evidently, and this is what they're saying. He does have he went to medical school at Duke University, which at the time when he went, Duke University did not require that you have a bachelor's degree, which is kind of weird to me. Honestly, it's just kind of weird. But he did graduate from Duke. Now, there's some other weird stuff around his credentials, which evidently he made his own board of whatever. I think it was the National Board of Ophthalmology is what he created. which isn't recognized by the American Board of Ophthalmologists, which is, I guess, the official board that, says that this guy's approved by us. And, we kind of take the accrediting agency. He created his own, which is kind of funny. And it's been in and out of existence for a while, so that he certified himself. He's not a board certified doctor, which is kind of interesting, what they call him, Dr. Paul. Now, the reason I bring this up is Brian Williams, who is as bad as he boogered up, and there's a lot of questionable stuff there. He gets suspended for 6 months, and everyone looks at him with a jaundiced eye. But Rand Paul, nobody's really paying attention to this. Now, you could say, well, that's just a little thing. I don't think so. Not once, but twice. And I have an English and a biology degree. Or twice said he had a biology degree. He doesn't. And that to me is dishonest. Can we suspend him for 6 months, please? Just a thought. Another one of our good Republican folks, Mississippi State legislator, guy named Gene Allday. Gene was doing an interview with the good folks at the Clarion Ledger there in Mississippi. And he come out against giving more money to elementary schools because you know what? He came from a town where, quote unquote, here it comes, all the blacks are getting food stamps and what I call welfare crazy checks. They don't work. I don't know what that's got to do with education money, but that's where he threw it in. He also went on to imply that increasing education funding for the children there was pointless. He continued on saying that while he was mayor of the town there in Walls, Mississippi, he had gone to the emergency room and he had to wait. No. Went to an emergency and had to wait. And why'd you have to wait? Well, he said, quote, I laid there for hours because they, those black people, were in there being treated for gunshots. You think maybe education would help that? Evidently not. Now, the great thing about Mississippi, and you got to give them credit, because my wife and I have talked about this in the past, it doesn't seem like anyone ever fails a grade anymore. When I was in school, kids failed all the time. The dumb kid kept getting held back. The kid whose parents didn't help them sit down and do homework, they get continually held back. Now, Mississippi has this third grade reading gate, where evidently if you don't meet a certain level of reading proficiency, you don't go to fourth grade, which seems reasonable to me, which puts pressure on people to say, hey, got to help this kid. Seems logical. Now, according to a survey done by the Dunn of Mississippi School Superintendents, they claim about 28% of their third graders now have to go back and repeat third grade because they don't read at a proficient level. So what you've got is these Republicans saying, well, we need to, because it's going to cost us money, we need you to, give them waivers, so you can push it down the road. And you give them waivers and exemptions for learning disabilities. So we're gonna take 28% of the kids and we're gonna label them with learning disability. And sorry, you can't. You can go through now. The governor, a Republican named Phil Bryant, again, I'm in favor of what he is doing. He opposes the waivers. He likes the third grade gate policy of, hey, let's make sure that they can read or do this work before they go on to the next level. He said, quote, it's disappointing that 62 members of the House of Representatives would vote to socially promote children who cannot read. He said, with votes like this, it's little wonder that Mississippi's public education system has been an abysmal failure. Now, Allday, Mr. I had to wait because they were getting fixed up for being shot. He opposes the increase in school funding, saying that he don't see any schools hurting. I don't see any schools hurting. Yeah. Wow. And that is Today in Crazy. Let's take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
They don't faze me, even if I'm looking like really crazy. I'll wait down. She betrayed me. Now my vision is no longer hazy. I'm very lucky to have my crew. They stood by me when she flew. I've been knocked down, beat down, black and blue. She's not the one coming back for you. She's not the one coming back for you. If I fall back down, you're gonna help me back home again. If I fall back down, you're gonna be my friend.
This week, the House will continue to focus on the people's priorities.
11th time's the charm. Republicans pass Keystone Pipeline bill again.
The magnitude of this deal is very, very big.
Apple invests big in solar.
It feels like we're under assault by Mother Nature.
Record snow in Boston, with more on the way.
State records reveal some disturbing news about California's drinking water.
Oil companies dumping toxic waste into California's aquifers. Plus,
estimates are that the monarch butterfly population has decreased 90% since the 1990s.
Uncle Sam wants you to help save the monarch butterfly.
All of those desperate pleas and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Even the president's own State Department will say that it's creates 42,000 new jobs.
No, Mr. Speaker, the State Department doesn't say that.
But instead of listening to people, the president's standing with a bunch of left fringe extremists and anarchists.
Anarchists?
The president needs to listen to the American people and say, yes, let's build the Keystone Pipeline.
Actually, it's only a minority of Americans that want to build the Keystone XL pipeline, but whatever. You know how those anarchists are. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, just to clear up a fact here, the State Department did not find that the Keystone XL pipeline would create 42,000 new jobs. But to be fair, it did find that it would create 34 new jobs. So Speaker John Boehner is only off by about 41,900 and something.
Yeah, he's fudging the numbers
Just a little, you think?
Yeah.
But then again, you're an extreme leftist or an anarchist. So what do you know?
Well, I do know that the House of Representatives passed the Senate's Keystone XL pipeline bill on Wednesday to force approval of the controversial pipeline from Canada. 29 Democrats in the House voted yes. One Republican, Justin Amash of Michigan, voted no.
Why did he vote no?
He said he's against special legislation for one private company to bypass the regulatory process.
Good for
energy is booming in the good, not explosive kind of way. Apple Computer CEO Tim Cook announced this week that Apple is investing $850 million to build a massive new solar farm. It's part of the company's goal to be 100% powered by renewable sources. All of Apple's data centers are already powered by renewables. Historic snowfall across the Boston area from a freight train of extreme storms with another on the way is straining the city's infrastructure and blowing a hole in its budget.
I've never seen anything like it. They're calling it Stormageddon, and it feels like we're under assault by Mother Nature.
Boston has received twice its average snowfall in just the past 3 weeks alone, and removing all that polluted snow is costing the city money. Some can be dumped in the ocean, but officials are now preparing for flooding when it melts. Boston's just the latest American city to discover it is not ready to deal with these extreme weather events. And in fact, a Department of Homeland Security official testified at a Senate hearing this week that total economic losses from extreme weather events over the last 30 years have cost the U.S. $1.5 trillion with a T, dollars. Too bad Boston can't ship that snow to California or Alaska. In Alaska, lack of snow has forced the Iditarod sled dog race to move its route for only the second time in over 40 years. And across the West, record warm winter temperatures are waking up grizzly bears early from their winter hibernation, according to rangers in Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. And in California, where the state is heading into its fourth year of historic drought, an AP investigation has found not only did California state regulators allow oil companies to inject production fluids and wastewater into federally protected aquifers, they allowed it more than 2,500 times.
They're injecting wastewater right beside an area where a farmer is pumping up irrigation water.
State officials say there's no evidence that water wells have been contaminated, but they have acknowledged the mistake and have begun shutting down some of those wells. Finally, monarch butterfly populations in North America have dropped 90% due to the exponential increase in the use of herbicides by farmers over the last 20 years. That's killed off milkweed, the monarch's food source. But good news, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wants your help.
We can make habitat for the monarch butterfly in backyards, in schoolyards, in city, county, state, and national parks. And the magic is that if we make the habitat, monarch butterflies will come.
So I'm just supposed to plant milkweed in my backyard?
Yeah, that is actually U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Director Dan Ash. It's a new $3 million habitat restoration program. They want everybody to plant milkweed from Texas to Minnesota.
Okay, do I get any of those $3 million?
No, you don't get $3 million for doing it.
Well, then I'll think about it. For much more on that story and the ones we couldn't get to this week, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on your public airwaves and plant some milkweed. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Butterflies are free, and so are we.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
It's your tomorrow. Right now, come on. It's everything.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So today, back in 2011, the schools in Milwaukee and Madison, Wisconsin were closed for the day because teachers were protesting the governor's insane, radical, extreme assault on teachers and their collective bargaining rights. They had a sick out where they, said, look, at the end of the day, we've got to do something. And if you remember, and we were there in Madison when all this was going on, you had hundreds of kids leaving school, walking out of school. You had hundreds of kids protesting in the streets. When we were there were 100,000 people in the Capitol there in Madison. If you've ever been there, it's a really sweet little town, just packed with people. Really a great little place, and I look forward to going back there at some point. Maybe when Walker is escorted out the door, or hopefully indicted for something. Maybe they should have kept him in London. Anyway, so that was today in the history there. Let's talk a little bit about education. The big testing season is upon us. In fact, my one of my kids' teachers said, I know you asked, so I got to tell you when the dates are. Because, look, I'm opting my kids out of these idiotic standardized tests, and here to talk a little bit about the opt-out movement and why we should be, as a parental body, saying, I don't think this is good. I've asked Steven Singer. He's a teacher, educator, also education blogger over at gadflyonthewallblog.wordpress.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Steven, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me again, Rick.
So, it's testing season again, and I guess nobody has to tell you. You know when the dates are coming up. I'm seeing finally, there's some kind of movement of people going, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
Finally, yes. In fact, I think even last year, I think the number of parents who opted out their children for standardized tests doubled. I can't remember if that was statewide or if that was nationwide. I think it was statewide. So there really is, this movement is starting to catch fire, I hope.
And the hope for me is that as educators start to go, you know what? I see what happens to these kids. I'm in these locked rooms, in these surveilled rooms. I see the personality changes. I see the strain, the stress, the pressure. I see all this stuff, and it's not good for these kids, and it's not helping them to learn either. So my hope is as educators step forward, maybe we, the parental unit, start to go, hey, maybe this isn't a great idea.
I certainly hope so. I know myself, you mentioned just a moment ago about, your own children. I just this week started to opt my own daughter out of standardized testing. And the strange thing is she's in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Kindergarten, to even think that would become an issue, for a 6-year-old child, but it is. This was her first year of school. So it was my first year going to a parent-teacher conference as a parent. Because I've always, done it as a teacher, and I have to say, off the top, the school that my daughter goes to, the high poverty, low income school that she goes to, it's excellent. I could say nothing but the best for the education she is getting at her local public school. And her teacher is fantastic. They're doing so much a better job than I ever would have even expected, even being a teacher. I really think they're doing great. But when I went in for the parent-teacher conference and I was talking to the teacher, who again is really fantastic, she starts telling me about the standardized tests my daughter is taking. And I'm not an early education teacher. I teach middle school. I was surprised that she was even taking them.
Yeah, I mean,
And
we're in the same boat because I have a kindergarten. My youngest is in kindergarten, and same thing. I'm stunned by what they have to go through and the testing that they do at 6.
yeah, it's insane. I mean, my daughter has to take the grade test and the Dibbles test. Now, I mean, Dibbles I kind of expected. The grade test, that's a test that's not mandated by the federal government. It's the reason that these districts take it is to get grant money from the state of Pennsylvania, from the Keystone Opportunities Grant. I know this because my district also gives the grade test, but I didn't know when I went down to kindergarten. I mean, when I proctor this test to my middle school students, it takes 3 hours for middle school students, my middle school students, to take it. They take it between 3 and 4 times a year. We do it 3 times in my district, but they really kind of want you to do it 4. So that's 9 hours of education lost to a test. It's not even a good test. It's a pretty bad test. It really doesn't give you any good information. In middle school, they have only 2 versions of this test that they give 3 to 4 times a year, 3 years in a row. So these kids are taking the exact same test over and over and over. That doesn't show anything. It just wastes time. It's horrible. And my daughter's taking it too, but obviously the early elementary one, the Kirk test, is going to be different than the ones my kids take. I was talking to her teacher, and she's really smart. She's talking about how she's cutting it up in these small bursts for the kids, for their attention spans. But what a waste for kids to be doing this.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And what's frustrating to me is my daughter's kindergarten teacher has been 30 some years, and she's just fantastic. Everyone loves her, and she's like, it's getting too much. All of the when you're talking about 6-year-olds, you're talking, as you pointed out, very short attention spans. But the way this teacher's explaining it to me, everything's regimented. Everything's, this is what you do at this minute. This is what you do at this minute. And it's this whole, it's like factory work. It's not like education that I remember as a kid that, was actually fun at times. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about it. From even just hearing my daughter talk about her day, and even talking with the teachers, they definitely do cut up things into these blocks. And there are good things about it too, about cutting things up like that so that you can get through a lot of stuff and transition back and forth. But I mean, looking at my daughter's homework, and first of all, that my daughter in kindergarten has homework, first of all, is kind of ridiculous. But the Common Core stuff that they're having her do, her homework, sometimes it consists of filling in a bubble to show what the right answer is. They're getting them that early to get them, in that mindset of how to, fill out a standardized test.
That's insane. That's insane. I'm not against the kids having homework, to be honest with you. I think it gets them into the mindset as they get older, they're going to have it. It's a responsibility. I get it. Where my frustration is, I don't think my kids get enough homework. I went to Catholic school where we had like 4 hours every single night. And if you didn't have it the next day, that nun came with the stick and it gave you a what for? But the thing that gets me is I don't think they have enough. So I'm in the minority when it comes to parents because I think they should be doing more.
Well, I mean, I give homework, and one of the things that if you talk to any of my students, they would say I give too much homework. And to be honest, I don't think I give that much. My goal as a teacher for middle school, I try to give them about an hour of homework a week, which I don't think is very much. But I think that is a lot more than they get in some classes. The only reason I really give the homework is because I know when they get to the high school, they're going to get a whole lot more than that.
Right.
Personally, I think homework, there are positives and negatives. I think it's a good thing to get a work ethic and to be organized and things like that. But there are positives and negatives of homework.
No, I mean, it's building responsibility. It's understanding that you work independent, that you have things that that you have to do. And to me, I think there are some good things to it. And it's understanding that you have the repetition, especially when you talk about math and other things, of doing multiple problems and coming to those answers and then checking them. I think all of that exercise is a good thing. Picking a little bubble on a little strip that gets fed through a machine. I'm sorry, I don't buy it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would agree with you.
So what do we parents do? What I've talked about this a number of times. At some point, I hope parents are paying attention that these tests really aren't doing their students, their children, any real good. Especially because you don't even get the results for months to come. What are parents to do?
First of all, I want to thank you for asking the right question, because that is the question. What should parents do? Because parents do have the power. We really do. As parents, we are in control, and we don't even realize it, I think, as parents. I think you really do have to be aware of what's happening, what's going on with your children in school. You got to talk to them about what's happening. You got to talk to the teacher. And I think you really do have to opt your children out of standardized testing. When I started to do it this Thursday, I mean, I'm a teacher. I'm, totally against testing. But when it actually came time to do it, I was kind of nervous, I have to admit. I was nervous about it. I thought, oh, my daughter's doing so well in school, and I don't want, her to have any negative connotations because her old man doesn't like testing or what have you. I had to really stop and think, say to myself, well, wait a minute, you know why this is wrong. Rationally, you understand that this is not helping her, this is hurting her. You got to go do it. And when I did, I called on Thursday to her school, and the principal called me back within 30 minutes, 45 minutes. It was really very friendly. And I think he was taken a little bit aback because I don't think he's getting a lot of calls like that, in kindergarten. But, we talked about the different tests that she's taking. And once he thought about it for a second, he said, okay, I think we can do this. And we're setting up a meeting. Sometimes you really got to think about the test. I mean, even that Dibbles test my daughter's taking, it's a reading fluency test. It's only like 6 to 10 minutes or so. The child sits down one-on-one with the teacher, and the child reads a passage, and the teacher grades based on how many words the child has read correctly within a certain time frame.
Right.
And when you look at it, just in what it is, well, is that a bad thing? But I talked with a lot of different teachers, and there were some early elementary teachers that said it's a really horrible thing, some that said it was a good thing. But it just came out, I think it was this week, that the Dibbles test is owned by Rupert Murdoch.
Oh, you're kidding.
I'm not. I wish I was. And they've decided to change the cut score. So what they're going to do is now, for no educational reason, it's going to become harder to pass the Dibbles test. You have to read more words in less amount of time to pass it, just so they can say more kids are failing it. So that's kind of pushed me over. Yeah, she's not going to take that Dibbles test either.
Wow, I didn't have a problem with that. To be honest, I remember as a kid doing the same thing. You'd go up to the teacher's desk and you would read to them. I didn't know if they were scoring or not, or you stood up in front of the class, which I always hated. And you would read a paragraph out loud, and obviously they were, knowing if you could read or not, and you got extra attention if you were struggling, and that stuff happened. I didn't realize it was actually big business that's doing this, because look, I go in on Thursdays into my son's third grade class and sit out in the hallway, and kids read a little passage to me for a minute, and I write down how many words they say and how many mistakes they make. I didn't realize I'm part of the machine.
It's like a Pink Floyd album,
No, I mean, I'm kind of frustrated because I think, I'm part of helping. I like going and helping out with the class where I can, because I know the teachers are overworked and they need a hand every once in a while, which I encourage all parents to go and help out in the classroom. But I didn't realize now I'm part of this whole I'm a cog in the wheel.
I think the mindset that we have to have, everyone, parents, teachers, policymakers, is if there's a standardized test, don't automatically accept it. Someone should have to give you a darn good reason that you're taking that test, that you're allowing that student to take that test. And I think we kind of think of it the other way. Give me the reason not to take it. No, give me the reason to take it, because I think as a culture, we've become addicted to this false statistic, this false universality of standardized tests. We have this idea that they give us something that they don't. This idea that these standardized tests give us this really useful information that can be taken from one state to another and show you some kind of global picture of what's happening in terms of education. It doesn't, not at all. And we become addicted to that idea. And it makes us devalue the kind of learning, the kind of grading that you get with a classroom teacher. Because if you think about it, a standardized test gives you a snapshot, at best, gives you a snapshot of how a student is doing
on
at
that
one
day.
given point. Yeah.
On that day.
On that day. At that moment in that day.
And what's frustrating to me, Stephen, is, I see my kids, and this is one of the really frustrating things that I wanted to bring up. The teacher told me the other day that, we went in for parent-teacher conferences, and my son is brilliant. He tests off the chart and everything, and it must be his mother because it's not me. But he's really a very bright kid. And everything he does is off the charts. And this one test he had, he was it was like 70% or something. I go, what's with this? And she goes, well, this is stuff I haven't taught yet. And I'm going, well, why are you testing him on something that hasn't been presented? Oh, it's so that when we give him the test, then we can show that there's a difference. I'm going, well, of course there's going to be a difference between he doesn't know anything and now you've shown him something.
Growth. That's another one of those buzzwords. Teachers have to show growth. We have these things now called SLOs, where we have to demonstrate that our students from point A to point B, there was X amount of growth. But when I say X, we actually do have to fill that number in. It's crazy the amount of time we have to use justifying that we're doing, that we're actually able to teach these kids, which takes away from our time to actually do the real work that we all came to try to do.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Last question. How do we get out of it? How do we save our kids this abuse? How do we save our kids this harassment? How do we save our kids from this?
I think there are several ways. One is we have to lobby our legislators. Right now, Congress, the Senate, is busy working to reauthorize the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is the federal law that governs K through 12 public schools. And they are talking about standardized testing and things like that. We need to push them to get rid of as much standardized testing as possible. I think also, when push comes to shove, parents need to opt their students out. They need to refuse standardized testing. We need to starve the machine of the data on which it feeds, on which it is able to justify closing schools that service poor minority students. We need to get involved in both ways, and I think that's really the only way we're going to get out of it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's all about staying involved. Stephen Singer, I appreciate you taking time for us. I appreciate the work that you're doing. We've got a link to the website, Gadfly on the Wall blog, so you can take a look at Stephen's writing. He's also done a nice little YouTube video clip that we'll make sure we get up so you can find Stephen. Always great talking with you. Thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
Stephen Singer. Let's take a quick break right back after this. Stick around to listen to The Rick Smith Show.
The bar's still open, but man, it's slow. The tip jar's light and the register's low. The bartender don't have much to say. The regular crowd gets thinner each day. Some are maxed out all their credit cards. Some are working 2 jobs and living in cars. Minimum wage won't pay for a roof, won't pay for a drink. If you gotta have proof, just try it yourself, Mr. CEO. See how far $5.15 an hour will go. Take a part-time job at one of your stores. I bet you can't make it here anymore.
Shouldn't America have at least one major party that is not beholden to the corporate elite? Well, look here. Just such a party has popped up, raring to roar into the 2016 presidential race. Called the KB Party, it has the funding and political punch to bypass the establishment's control of the election system. But don't rush to sign up. KB stands for Koch brothers. Yes, Charlie and David, the multi-billionaire right-wing industrial barons who already own several Congress critters, governors, think tanks, AstroTurf campaign machines, front groups, etc., now have their very own private political party. And it's not beholden to the corporate elite, since it is the elite. The Koch boys have rallied roughly 300 like-minded opponents of democracy to their brotherhood of plutocrats, intent on purchasing a president and Congress that will impose their vision of corporate rule over America. At a secretive retreat in January for KB party funders, the 300 barons ponied up $900 million for their campaign. That's nearly $200 million more than the combined expenditures of the Republican and Democratic parties in last year's elections. And it's way more than either of those parties will have for 2016. Means that in our nation of 350 million people, a cabal of only 300 of the wealthiest will have the wherewithal to narrow the choice of candidates presented to the rest of us, restrict the range of policy ideas that are proposed to voters, imbue the overall campaign with a negative tone, and, most important, shape the governing get elected. This is Jim Hightower saying the Supreme Court's disastrous Citizens United edict created this mess. To help ban the corporate cash that's clogging our elections and killing our people's democratic rights, go to democracyisforpeople.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone in a time of need.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. You know, these standardized tests, and I think of the millions of dollars that we spend. I shouldn't even say millions, the billions of dollars we spend on these industries. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised that there shouldn't be any real surprise that the fake news on Fox people, the Rupert Murdochs, own one of these major education tests, one that I've actually heard of. And every, as any parent would know, you go to these parent-teacher conferences, they always bring out the Dibble score. And no one's ever, I don't know what Dibbles stands for, but I know it's a reading test, and I know it's, part of this, you go and you read, much like I did when I was a kid. I just didn't know there was, an actual test for it when I was a kid. And I got to think there really probably was not an official test. And this is how education has changed over the last, 20, 30, 40 years. 40 years ago when I was, going to kindergarten, first grade, they didn't have this industrialized education. They didn't have as many. I think we had the Iowa test of basic skills. You did it one or 2 days, 2 hours, and bang, that was your test. That was your standardized test, and that was really the beginning of all this. And I remember as a kid, you stood up in front of the class and you read your little paragraph, and the teacher mocked you, and that's not true. The nun mocked you. But I didn't realize this is this one simple test that I'm actually something up a part of, because I go in on Thursdays and, for an hour and sit with the kids and they read a paragraph. And my job is to if they struggle over a word, to make sure they know it and write down how many words and, which ones they stumbled on or got wrong, so that they can read it again and get it right the next time. And that this is part of this whole thing. I actually see value in reading and learning the words and feeling comfortable and fluent. But putting this in one of those situations where, we're now profiting off of this just seems kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of upset now. Because, now you're part of the machine. And I'm opting my kids out of these tests for my religious purposes, the ethic of reciprocity, do unto others. But honestly, it's because I don't see a value in it for them, and the stress and the abuse that they put themselves through just kind of makes me go, I don't want to be part of this machine that's set up specifically to destroy public education. And I think the more you explain to parents, and I think Stephen hit it right on the head, you've got to explain why they're taking it. much like a test when you go to the doctor. Why am I taking it? Why am I doing this? I think that's more of the thought that we need to be talking about and asking ourselves. Just it makes sense to me. So I suggest people check out the website unitedoptout.org. We'll make sure we get links up at the ricksmithshow.com so folks can make that choice. And it's about information, simple stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
The PMA is trying to divide us. They're using lies and tactics to turn the public against us and turn locals against the negotiating committee and the rank and file against each other. Nobody divides the ILWU. Nobody. We're going to win this fight. We're going to win this battle, but there's only going to be one way to do it, and that's to stick together and stay strong and stay united.
ILWU President Robert McElrath. President Obama has directed Labor Secretary Tom Perez to help mediate the West Coast ports' labor talks. The union has been without a contract for months. For the past several days, the Pacific Maritime Association has locked out ILWU members at 29 West Coast ports who could have been loading and unloading ships to help relieve the cargo congestion at the ports. McElrath says the union is determined to win a fair contract, and he urged dock workers to hold the line.
Stay strong, stay united, listen to your local officers, listen to your negotiating committee. Do not listen to superintendents on the job. Do not listen to PMA's bullshit. Stay united. Brothers and sisters, thank you. And an injury to one is an injury to all.
The United Steelworkers oil industry strike heads into another week as the union tries building international solidarity to augment the strike effort in the U.S. USW held a week of solidarity events in Europe, picketing Royal Dutch Shell and other oil industry facilities in the Netherlands. Big Oil may be trying to spin this as a grab for more money when oil prices are down, but United Steelworkers President Leo Gerard is quite clear about the real reason for the unfair labor practices strike against 11 U.S. oil refineries.
This issue is about the company's refusal to look at and bargain over safe working conditions. It's about making sure that we have a fatigue standard that they don't manipulate. We've got too many cases now where they ask the workers, imagine this, to work 14 or 16 days in a row in 12-hour shifts.
Wisconsin's Republican-controlled state government is taking more tax money out of public schools to pay for private school vouchers. School Choice Wisconsin, a corporate front group for the private charter school industry, now not only wants tax money funneled to private schools, the group wants Wisconsin school districts to divulge the information so it can use it in sales pitches to get students to leave public schools. One Wisconsin Now's Scott Ross says Wisconsin residents are already paying tens of millions of tax dollars every year for tuition for kids already attending private schools. Ross says the private school voucher industry is treating public school children and their personal information like commodities to be bought and sold. He says they're treating public schools as a resource to be looted.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you live again. It's times like these.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. You may remember a couple of weeks back, I took a couple of days off from the big program, and my wife found her way down in South Carolina to spend a couple of days with her father who had taken ill. And, I remember talking, extensively when I came back about, what do families do? I mean, my in-laws live in other places. My grandmother lives back in Cleveland. I live here in Pennsylvania. How do you deal with these situations, the guilt, all the stuff that comes along with not being there to help them? And I remember going there, there's got to be a way to balance all this. There's got to be a way from public policy to help as we all get older to help take care of folks. And then, one of the people who feeds me guests sent me a book by Ai-jen Poo. It's called The Age of Dignity. preparing for the elder boom in a changing America. And I said, you know what? This is somebody we got to have, which is why I've asked Ai-jen to come on the program. Ai-jen Poo, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So, like I said, I got this book right in the time when, we were going through one of these moments going, how are we going to care for my father-in-law if things are really bad? Do we move him into our house? How do things go? And it just became, this conversation that I think this country at this time really needs to have.
Yes, you're not alone in that conversation and in that struggle. I mean, everywhere I go, this is such a deeply felt personal issue that every one of us is experiencing and is quickly becoming a national issue because we actually don't have a plan. Not only do our families generally not have a plan for how we're going to care for our aging loved ones, but we as a nation don't have a plan, and that is untenable when we think about the changing demographics that we're seeing with people living longer than ever and the baby boom generation retiring at a rate of 10,000 people per day. I mean, it is a real need and also a real opportunity here, and that's really what the book's about.
Yeah, I mean, my wife and I are in a fairly fortunate position when we were considering our options, and that my wife doesn't work. She stays home and raises our children, which I'm not saying isn't work. It's a lot more work than I do. But fortunately, we're in a situation where I work outside the home and she's at home where she could take care of her father if need be. But sadly, our society isn't built that way anymore. This isn't the 1950s where you have a caregiver at home where things, because we like to idealize things. Well, we'll bring so-and-so into the house and grandma can stay with us. We're not built for that anymore, are we?
No, we're not. This is a different world. Most families don't have somebody who is at home, and even if they did, most families are living thousands of miles apart from one another, and the economic, emotional, and spiritual kind of stress of the sandwich generation that's the generation that's caught between caregiving on the one hand for their children and on the other hand for their aging parents. It's just we're squeezed by all of these different demands without any real support or infrastructure, whether it's from public policy or otherwise. And it's simply not tenable in this day and age.
Yeah, and as I was reading through your book, the one part that just grabbed me, you were talking about being in New York, and your mother and father were in California, and as you were flying back, because I guess your grandfather had was back into the hospital, and you said something along the lines of all of the regret, the guilt, all of the stuff that you heaped on yourself for not showing up, for not being there more often. I just completely identified that when my grandmother got taken to the hospital not too long ago. And again, I think as you've said, that sandwich generation, we're in that, and I think those feelings are part of that.
They are, and there's a solution. There's a way for us to actually turn towards these changes and create plans and public policy and real infrastructure. When we think about how fundamental caregiving is, we call it the work that makes all other work possible. Because without it, without that family level support, where the people that we love and care about the most in life are actually able to have the support and security at every stage of life. Without that, nothing else is possible. Yeah. And so this is a time where we absolutely need to turn towards this issue and come up with solutions. And you can see the seeds of solutions everywhere. We just need to really invest in it in a different way in this moment.
Do you think it's possible, given our political makeup, the complexities we have in Washington and most state houses across the country, where there's this disdain of government action, there's this distrust of government, that new policies that I think we both agree we need to be pursuing are looked at with a jaundiced eye?
It's a question I get often, and I really believe that if ever there was a generation that was going to change the way this country thinks about, feels about, and prepares for aging, it's going to be baby boomers. I mean, the generation that has changed so much about American culture can actually rise to this task of changing our approach to aging and caregiving on top of the fact that young people, millennials, another very important force for political change, are more connected to their grandparents than any generation in the history of this country. You go to any college campus and ask how many of those young people grew up with their grandparents heavily involved in their upbringing, and it's at least 60 to 70% of the hands in the room go up. And so I think that this can become a multi-generational political priority in a way that it's never been. And I also think that the practical demands on us as families and as a society to come up with solutions is going to be so great when we think about the 27 million of us who are going to need some form of long-term care or assistance by the year 2050. It really is something that we're going to need answers for, and we can't afford not to develop them ultimately. And hopefully there will be enough leaders and enough of us who step forward and demand that leadership that can really take the first steps, but then I think we'll see a wave of change.
Yeah, I mean, you threw out a big number there. 27 million of us are going to need it by 2030. Eventually, I do believe all of us at some point are going to be in that situation where you're going to need some help, be it from a child, be it from a caregiver from outside or an institution. I think it's not just those old people, because we're all getting older.
Well, Rosalind Carter said it best. She said there's only 4 kinds of people in the world: people who are caregivers, people who will be caregivers, people who need care or will need care. And I tell you what, I think we're more than one of those categories at any given moment in time. So this is absolutely a universal issue, which means that if we take it from our sort of individual private struggles into the realm of a national priority, a national policy priority for the future, it will actually be one of the few issues that is so universally experienced in our society across lines of race and class and all kinds of experiences. I mean, rural communities are dealing with it, urban communities are dealing with it. We're going to need a solution, and we will have the power to make those solutions happen because of how widely felt and experienced this is.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Ai-jen Poo. She's the author of The Age of Dignity, Preparing for the Elder Boom in a Changing America. She's also co-director of Caring Across Generations and a MacArthur Genius Fellow. I look at the book and I think it's something that all politicians should have to read, because, while identifying stories that we all, I think, can identify with, it's talking about policy and how we get to that next level. And for me, it's keeping people in their homes. It's keeping my grandmother in her home that she and my grandfather built and lived for 40, 50 years. It's about not institutionalizing them as we had done in the past. My mother worked in a nursing home that was nothing more than a warehouse. It is truly, in my view, about giving people dignity in their golden years and making them truly golden. So, lay out some of the policy that you think is a good idea and where we should be pursuing.
I think we should be creating millions of new jobs in home care to support the growing needs of our families, especially when they live far away from their loved ones. There needs to be a workforce who can come in and support people to age in place and in their communities. Millions of new jobs, which can also, by the way, create jobs that are much needed. We need to create jobs, and I think we all know that. So these are potentially 21st century jobs for the future if we turn them into good jobs that you can take pride in, support your family on. I often think of it like what we did with manufacturing jobs in the 20s and 30s. We turned those factory jobs from sweatshop jobs that were dangerous, where there were fires, where people were poor, and a lot of immigrants working in those factories. And we transformed those jobs into jobs where every generation could do better than the next, where there was real opportunity right along this pathway. And there was a sense of pride and a sense of identity built around that work. I mean, these caregivers are the unsung heroes. They're the first responders in times of crisis, and they're providing this national public service. And if we can turn these jobs into good jobs, we can create millions of new jobs and also ensure that our aging loved ones, like my grandparents and soon my parents, actually have real choices to live well in their homes as they age, just as you said.
You know, what's interesting to me, Ajahn, is that what we do in this country to our most vulnerable populations. You look at our seniors, you look at our children. We're demonizing teachers. There's a movement of demonizing and putting down domestic workers as and home health care aides. I look at these messages that are out there, and it doesn't send me that warm fuzzy feeling and that belief in family values that we're often told as a nation we have.
It's true. In hard times, we are susceptible to being turned on one another. And in the book, I quote another civil rights activist who says that this is actually a moment to turn towards one another. And if ever there was an issue that would allow us to do so, it really is caregiving, because we are so universally touched by this. And so I think that while we are susceptible to the dehumanizing and undervaluing and sort of making invisible of populations, that we are also capable of uplifting and strengthening one another and joining together in ways that defy all odds. And I've seen it happen. And I've seen the amazing power of the relationship between the clients and the caregivers who are supporting them. They are oftentimes people of very different cultures and experiences who develop a bond like no other. And if that doesn't tell you that we can come together as a country when we need to, I don't know what does.
Let me ask you a last line of questioning. We've been talking a lot about what's going on here in the U.S. How do other countries handle this issue? Because honestly, I'm sure many of the other industrialized countries are dealing with the same kind of demographics that we have here in the U.S. How are they looking down the road? How are they looking in the future of caring for their parents and grandparents?
I'm glad you raised this, because the elder boom really is a global phenomenon. When you talk to any of these, there's this whole field called futurism and megatrends analysis, and you talk to any of those people, they will tell you there are all these things that are going to be defining of the future, and always the elder boom is cited as one of those. And countries like Japan and Germany have experienced it. They started experiencing it earlier than we did. And so they've put into place holistic programs that really pull together the healthcare needs and the retirement security needs and the long-term care needs of their older populations in a more holistic social insurance program that people pay into their whole lives. So they don't separate out long-term care from healthcare, and they think about quality of life as a very holistic thing. And I think that that's the direction that we need to be moving into. Is
so you're not
really. Mm-hmm.
So you're not in favor of cutting Social Security and gutting Medicare, or the what few programs we have to aid our seniors?
Quite the contrary. I think my philosophy is protect what we've earned, create what we need. We need to secure Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and we need a new framework to support long-term care, because we have no program that supports long-term care. And we need to think about how we update and upgrade all of these policies to better reflect our 21st century realities, as you said before.
Yeah, because I look at the retirement, you mentioned retirement security, and we've got a real crisis coming up, not just on what we're going to do with people as they age, but what are people going to do with themselves, because they don't have the defined benefit pensions that they had a generation ago. We've got these wonderful 401ks that most workers seem to have that don't have any money in them, but we've got them. And I worry what happens to those folks, in 10, 20, 30 years.
I worry too, and that's why one of the pieces of this book tour that I'm on is just going around the country and really asking families to have a conversation at their dinner table across generations, everyone. This is an all hands on deck moment where we need to really come together, not from a place of fear, but from a place of planning and intention and communication, healthy communication, and have a conversation about what we're going to do as a family to prepare for our future caregiving needs and to prepare for the aging of our families. Yeah. And then what do we anticipate could be the joys of that? What possibilities could come of us working together to take care of one another? And I do believe that there's possibilities and responsibility there. In addition, we've got to call upon our elected leaders to put into place the support and infrastructure. They've got to do their part in creating a sustainable, a real shot for the future for our families to be able to really take care of each other. I mean, we can do our part, and there's a huge role for our collective infrastructure for the common good for us to have public programs that support caregiving.
I'm right there with you. And for me, one of the things I would like to see is caregivers being paid and having a, even if it's your own son or daughter or your mother or your father, having an infrastructure where you don't have to have two people out in the workforce working, where one person can stay home and be that caregiver and still not be left out and left behind. Just makes sense to me.
Absolutely. We should have a voucher program or a family bonds program where people can actually take time off from work to care for their loved ones and not have to worry about losing Social Security credits or losing too much income. We should be able to support families who are in a variety of scenarios around their caregiving needs, because the needs are so different and they change so quickly. Someone with early stage Alzheimer's is very different from late stage, and their needs are completely different, and let alone any other, a whole other range of chronic illnesses and conditions of frailty, and all of these things are things that we should be able to support families on and give them more choices around. I'm right there with you. Again, the book is The Age of Dignity, Preparing for the Elder Boom in a Changing America. The first person, send me an email, rick@thericksmithshow.com, gets a copy of it. Asian Poo, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thank you for bringing this up and all the work that you're doing. I see you everywhere, and I hope this starts that conversation and gets us down that road to where we need to be. Well, thank you for helping us get this conversation going among your listeners. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We're in a fight to bring the middle class back, and we ain't even planning on losing in this mighty war. The working class is under attack. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on. To the death, fight on. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1883, marking the deadliest day in Illinois mining history at the time. 74 boys and men lost their lives digging for coal in the diamond mine disaster in Braidwood, Illinois. The Wilmington Coal and Manufacturing Company owned the mine. It was located in a marshy, low-lying area. At midday, the east side of the mine collapsed from the weight of the melting snow. The combination of melting snow and heavy rains flooded the mine. Those trapped below could not open the ventilation doors against the heavy weight of the water. 2 of those who lost their lives that day were just 13 years old. One miner, John Huber, recounted his experience. I rushed as fast as the nature of the passage would allow to where I thought my sons were at work, but found that they had gone. I then yelled at the top of my voice to the men near me and made as fast as I could for the air shaft, where I knew there was a ladder and I could get out. By this time, the water was up to my armpits, and I had a hard time to get up the shaft. When he finally escaped the mine, he learned his sons had not made it out. After the disaster, it took 7 steam pumps 38 days to remove enough water to attempt to rescue the bodies. Falling rocks and accumulation of gas made recovery work very dangerous. 46 of the dead were never recovered. In 1898, the United Mine Workers of America placed a memorial at the site. The diamond mine disaster was one tragic entry of many that plagued the mining industry. During the first 2 decades of the 20th century, mining claimed nearly 50,000 lives in the United States. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
These are words you should have told the truth. You're lying, traitor, and now we got the proof. Where you gonna run to? Where you
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Interesting conversation, because what are you going to do with the next generation? What do we do with our elderly population? What are we going to do with ourselves? And I've told this story before when my wife and I were talking about and considering starting a family. Someone asked me, well, what are you hoping for? And look, I was an athlete. And everyone thought, big macho guy, big football player, basketball, baseball, that's he's going to want a son. And I said, nah, actually, I guess I was older, and I go, I'm hoping for a daughter. Because I'm going to need a ride to the nursing home, or at least someone who's going to care enough to go look at the nursing home before they shove me in it. And, part of that was joking, but part of it is, the reality of our society, that, the majority of the caregiving has fallen on the shoulders of women. Like, for instance, when my wife and I, decided we were going to have children, who's going to stay home? Because we both immediately thought somebody has to stay home to raise the child. We're not going to put them in daycare and pay someone else to raise our children. Who gets to stay home? And I immediately raised my hand. Me. I'd like to stay home and raise the kids. Problem was, I made more than double what my wife made doing what she was doing. So, we're stuck in these gender identity roles where she's at home raising the children and I'm out working because of economics. I would have loved to be able to stay home and raise the kids. I think it's it's amazing opportunity to watch these creations grow into the people that they will become, and that's you watch their personalities develop. You're there every day, and you see these changes, and I'm a bit envious of that. And I think as a society we should be encouraging families to be able to take that route, or somebody stays home to be that caregiver. Sadly, we've been pushed into this economic world where 2 incomes now is what it takes, 3 and 4 and 5 to raise to support a family. And I, going back to my belief that we need stronger labor unions, I'm of the mindset it's been the destruction of unions that has caused the breakup of the family. It's the destruction of collective bargaining. It's the destruction of decent wages. It's the destruction of a defined benefit pension so that you know what you have come retirement time. All of these capitalist pro-Reagan ideas, all of this supply side voodoo Reaganomics has brought us to this place. And let's throw in the neoliberals along with it, throw them all into the mix. The hyper-capitalists to say, leave it to the free market. And if you can't participate, then you just sit on the side of the road on the curb and die. I blame those ideas on this. We had a system in place where you went to work, you worked hard, you did your job, and at the end of it, you got the little gold watch, you got a retirement and your Social Security, and you were able to live with some measure of dignity. And you were able to support a family on one income, and that one income allowed somebody to be at home for when, grandpa down in South Carolina is taken to the hospital, mom's running down. And maybe if need be, you bring him back to the house, and you better set up a way to figure out how to exist in that environment. And if you can't, keep people in their home longer. I mean, I look at my grandmother. Fortunately, she's been able to stay in her home with the help of people coming through to check on her. You need to have those systems in place. Sadly, as a nation, we haven't done that. And sadly, as a nation, we just really haven't thought much about it. And that's why I think Ajan Poo's book here is a good conversation starter. And the great thing about it, for those who want to pick it up, and we've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com of how you can do that. It's a very short book. It's very compact, but it hits right to the point. It's not one of these 300-page treatises. It's right to the point. Here, this is my story. She talks about her grandfather and her grandmother and the struggles that they had, and the journey that they had, and where we go from there. And I think it's a story for all of us. Because at some point we're all going to be in that boat. As I was reading it last night, I was thinking, wow, I'm 18, 15, 17, 18 years away from retirement. What am I going to do? Fortunately, we've been saving, and we think we're going to be okay. But if you're going to live into your 80s and 90s, which they're saying more people are going to be doing, what do we do with folks as a society? Do we allow them to eat cat food? Do we allow them to freeze in their homes, as we've heard stories of? And what does that say about us, the richest nation in the world, where we can have the billionaire class have their own everything, their own separate country within our country, and yet we have people who are literally starving and freezing to death for no other reason than they're old. Something wrong with that. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
They saw that food was everything to man. And maybe then they had a thought, help the poorest folks, but it only brought more money to their hands. And the poor keep getting poorer, people turn away, not equal to admit the way they planned. It's taking all the soul away from everything they grew. They can't argue, it's on which to stand.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
So you want to get in the whiskey business, do you? Well, you'd better study Mr. Daniel and his loyal family's success. It's not easy setting up a distillery, making quality whiskey, and marketing the product for a profit. But plenty of people have tried because those products and profits can both be mighty fine. The best case study of any distiller's long road through politics and regulations is the story of the Jack Daniel family. Mr. Jasper Newton Daniel was born in Lynchburg, Tennessee, and was nicknamed Jack as a young child. You'll find conflicting information and colorful tales proven false in Mr. Daniel's history, including his birthday. His biographer concludes it was in January of 1849. Jack's father died in the Civil War and his mother had passed before. Thus, he was orphaned as a teenager. But join us again as Preacher McCann takes him in. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. In his recent request for an authorization for the use of military force against ISIS, President Obama expressed his opposition to engaging in, quote, another prolonged ground war in the Middle East, which he said is not in our national security interest. But if you listen to Fox News' Gretchen Carlson, you would think the president had said something else entirely. Here's how she distorted President Obama's claim that U.S. ground troops are not necessary to defeat ISIS.
Battling ISIS abroad, it's a war of words here at home over strategy and the use of American ground troops. The president may have more clarifying to do after saying that we have no national security interest in this fight, despite constant threats to American lives, like Kayla Mueller.
Carlson continued.
What did President Obama mean yesterday when he said that it's not in our interest to defeat ISIL? Huh?
But the truth is that while Obama claimed that a prolonged ground war was, quote, not in our national security interest, he expressed that, quote, our core objective is to destroy ISIL. That doesn't sound like he said it's not in our interest to defeat ISIL to us. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen! In the end, Wall Street, with Obama, Duncan, Bloomberg, Walcott, and Goldstein as its agent, they want to turn public education into private, profitable businesses. They hope to impose factory regime of managerial control over educators' working conditions and our students, our children's learning conditions. Shut it down.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. One of my favorite quotes that came out of the whole Occupy Wall Street movement. They were there in New York at the Department of Education saying, hey, look, we don't like what's happening to our education system. And one of the things that I think that I ultimately give the Occupy movement credit for is bringing a lot of the issues that, me on this program had been screaming about for years, that people had been saying, hey, this is what's really important. They brought that to the center of the attention. They got the national media, at least maybe with a jaundiced eye kind of on the side of their face looking at, but somebody was still paying a little bit of attention to it. And while many of us thought, this will eventually fizzle out, but this is a great springboard to what's next. And it has been, in my view. But the books are being written as we speak. The latest one that I've come across is called The Occupiers, written by Michael Gould-Wartofsky, which is why we've asked Michael on the program to come talk about it. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me, Rich.
So, I look at the Occupy movement, which, the mainstream media mocked and, every negative thing they could throw out there. But the reality is, I think most workaday people were looking at it going, they're talking about issues that are important to the ham and eggers. They're talking about, good wages. They're talking about education. They're talking about things that are really important to a society.
That's absolutely right, Rich. And I think, Occupy basically said what was on everyone's mind at the time, that, we were told there was a crisis of, the deficit, budget crisis, but really what we got in this country is a crisis of inequality. We have a jobs crisis. We have a crisis of stagnant wages. People aren't seeing the fruits of the recovery for years now. So I think Occupy really brought it out into the open so that people could talk about it and talk about what we could do about it.
I look at it, and as I said, my thought at the time was eventually this passion, the people in the streets, they go home, they dissipate, and the fervor of the moment goes away. And the question is what's the next step? And we've seen a lot of little movements pop out of this. And I look at the fast food strikes and the Fight for 15 campaign as one of those, just one of them that I think come directly out of that.
Yeah, absolutely, Rich. And I think Occupy really. Once we cast that spotlight on economic inequality, all kinds of things can happen out of that. And so we've seen that in the last 3 or 4 years. People kind of turned from occupying to organizing and really trying to take it back to the workplaces and the places where people are struggling to make ends meet. And, ordinary Americans, I think, responded to this message. It resonated with them. And, hopefully we'll start seeing some of the gains, at the grassroots level as some of these offshoots really get organized.
Because as we saw across the country, there were a number of people who got involved with the Occupy in their local community. I know I did here in Harrisburg, although I, quickly grew frustrated with part of the, the whole open court kind of General Assembly thing that seemed to take forever for everything. Right. But out of that came a lot of very passionate activists who took that to the next level and provided what I think is some decent leadership.
That's right. And I think you're seeing the new generation of activists coming out of movements like this. You're seeing it with the labor movement. You're seeing it with the housing movement. You're seeing it, in efforts to raise the minimum wage. And I think that, people have been getting serious these last few years. And, students and workers and working people coming together, there's power in that.
So what got you to write the book? I mean, a lot of people, were involved in this. What made you take that step to say, I'm going to document this. I'm going to put it down onto a book?
Well, it just so happened that I was there from day one with a camera and a pen and a pad, and just kind of found myself taking notes, taking lots of pictures, interviewing folks, and it struck me as something that could really change the equation for working people in this country. So I wanted to follow it from day one. So once I had all this research, basically just having been down there at Zuccotti Park, paying attention to what was going on, I was approached to write the book, and I said yes, because we need more voices, and I thought maybe we could use this book as a platform for some of those voices from the movement.
Just in earlier in the hour, we were talking with Ajan Poo, who wrote this great book, the Age of Dignity, talking about what we're going to be doing with our senior population as they grow older. And I really think we have to spend a lot of time thinking, because we're all getting a little bit older. I think we have to talk about that, but also what we've done to the past generations of students who are saddled with massive student loan debt, lack of opportunity. There are a lot of problems in this country that need to be addressed that it seems like our politicians have continually turned a blind eye to.
No, absolutely, and it falls to grassroots movements to really bring these issues and put them on the agenda, because otherwise, no one's going to know, what kind of suffering is out there. Everyone's going to feel it in silence and and on their own. But once people come out into the open, start talking about it, making an issue of it in public, then I think a lot of other things become possible. And you mentioned the seniors. This is an intergenerational alliance that we're seeing. The 99% movement was really an alliance between different generations. That were kind of faced with the costs, paying the cost of a crisis they didn't create, and faced with the prospect of losing the rights and the living standards that generations before us have taken for granted. So this was really an alliance between older folks and younger folks, seeing that they had a common interest and a common struggle here.
And looking back to that time, because I remember, in fact, my daughter and I had gone through Zuccotti Park during the occupation there, and I remember, just thinking what an amazing bit of courage it took, because everywhere you look, there were cops everywhere. I mean, and my daughter was like, I can't believe this is, who was at the time, just a couple of years, 10 or 9 or 10 years old, going, I can't believe this is America.
Yeah, this was really a wake up call, I think, for a lot of people. Even people who are kind of supportive of maybe public safety and some of these policies, but are seeing just young people nonviolently protesting and getting pepper sprayed and beaten down in the streets. That's not my America. That's not our America.
And the hope is that we change this stuff. So in looking back at this, because you think about the messaging that came out of it. And I know fake news on Fox was the constant rapes and all muggings and all of this stuff that
Correct.
From what I understand, never really happened, but it made for a good story, right?
That's right. And the media loves that kind of stuff and don't love to talk about inequality. They don't love to talk about the issues, right? So I think this was really a moment when the mainstream media just couldn't get away with that anymore for a while. And then once they were able to kind of concoct some of these stories, the NYPD was dropping off folks who had some problems, near the park and saying, hey, go there, you could do whatever you want there. They were selectively enforcing the law and only enforcing it against peaceful protests, not really enforcing the other law. So I think, there were some issues in the camps, but a lot of those issues were just issues that we see every day, in our cities. And, the fact that in this age of austerity, we don't have the means to provide for people, provide a home, provide basic social services. Occupy was providing those services to a lot of people, until we got evicted. So I think that's also something to keep in mind.
Yeah. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Michael Gould-Wartofsky. He's written the book, The Occupiers, The Making of the 99% Movement. You can get the book from his website, michaelgouldwartofsky.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Click on it and you can pick up the book. It's interesting you bring that up, that you built those bodies that were needed to feed people and to get medical care and all kinds of systems that you would expect in a governing body. When we were in Wisconsin for the big uprising in 2011, it was the exact same thing. They had this chant. This is what democracy looks like, and they did. They had places where people could food if they were hungry. They had places where you could get medical care. They had child care services. They had set everything up, cleaning crews. It was remarkable to watch how this all just came together. But I guess not so much because it's kind of ingrained in us, I think.
That's right. This is part of who we are. We take care of each other. Working class Americans, this is part of our tradition. And, I think you saw that come out 4 years ago in Wisconsin. You saw it in Zuccotti Park. You saw it all across the country. And, over 200 different cities had occupies, where people were getting fed and getting taken care of. And, until we have a government that, and a society that really does that and looks out for everyone, I think, we're going to need to kind of look to these models and look to these examples, for how we can take care of each other.
In the coming years, what should we be looking for? I mean, and thinking of some of these big picture stuff, out of this Occupy movement, like we said, there have been other things that have popped up. What should we continue to be looking out for? Are there any things that you found that you're seeing that may come to our attention here in the near future out of this?
Absolutely. I think that for one, the fight for 15 in a union, is coming to campuses all across the country now. Young people are really taking up this fight for to raise the wage floor, to get some basic standards of and some basic dignity for working people. You're going to see a lot of those kinds of alliances coming back together. Students and labor, like you saw with the anti-sweatshop movement and living wage campaigns. A lot of that's coming back now, and then you also see some really new politics coming out of this, new coalitions between communities and labor, between young people who are underemployed or unemployed, tremendous amounts of debt, working together with people in the workplaces and in the unions. And a lot of these coalitions kind of came out of the Occupy moment, but they're gonna come back. It's only a matter of time till they come back. And when we have to, I think you're gonna see us in the streets again if they try to keep beating working people down.
Well, as I've said, that's the only place where things change. When the wealth class of this country fears that their head could end up on a platter, that's the only time it changes. And you go back to the Great Depression. Right. I mean, the reality is during the Great Depression, the people of this country were literally tearing the country apart brick by brick, trying to feed their families and exist. And it was only because of the New Deal and the programs that came out of that to give people jobs and dignity and respect that you saw this boom of a middle class. I've been of the mindset, Michael, that at some point we need to have that kind of in the streets activism again.
We sure do, and we're not going to see policy change without it. We can wait around all we want, and we can hope for the best, but really the only solution, the only way to get there is through collective action. Through coming together in a really public way and seeing our power in numbers, which is at the end of the day is greater than the power that's on the other side.
Yeah, but at the end of this, I mean, for 30 years we've been sold this idea, Michael, that we're the individual, we're Horatio Alger, we've pulled ourselves up from the bootstraps that we whittled from our intestinal fortitude, and we're so wonderful and fantastic, and our self-image is so bloated that my fear is it has to come to where all of that's broken down. And I fear that because we've been told for so long we don't need each other when the reality is we really do.
That's right. And I think really all we need is a chance to see, that we do need each other and to see examples of people working together, people taking care of each other like we saw in 2011, 2012 out there in Wisconsin and in New York. So I think, this is a myth, right? And we've been told this our whole lives. My generation, the millennial generation, has grown up with this myth. But I think increasingly, we're starting to call it for what it is, which is a bunch of BS.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is the 1%, they're going to take care of themselves just fine. Thank you very much. And generally at the expense of the rest of us, which is why I thought Zuccotti Park there in Wall Street was the perfect place to have this. These were the criminals who caused the collapse of our economy, yet they weren't held accountable.
That's right. And, sometimes the only way to hold their feet to the fire is to show up on their home turf and say, here we are, you're occupied. And, I think Wall Street really couldn't ignore this once it caught fire, once it caught the imagination of the country. A lot of people were getting worried up on Wall Street, and a lot of 1%ers across the country were really taking notice. So I think if we want to be able to pose that threat, in a credible way and in a nonviolent way, we're going to have to take it back to the financial centers. We're going to have to take it back to the state capitals. We're going to have to take it back to the centers of power. And, really show them what we're about.
Let me ask you, out of all of that, because Occupy really did bring more attention to Wall Street. Do you think what we've done as a government, as a nation, to attempt, if you believe, the Dodd-Frank did anything to rein in the greed and the abuses, do you think that was sufficient? Do you think people feel warm and fuzzy that Wall Street isn't going to be able to collapse our economy as they did in 2008 again?
I wish I could say yes, but you're looking at where the wealth is going right now. It's going the same place it was going in 2008. It's it's a bubble, and we're seeing this tremendous kind of rising tide for the 1%, the top 1% in this country, but we're not seeing the benefits of that down here for the rest of us. And I think Dodd-Frank did something, but they've really defanged it. They've taken the clause out of a lot of this legislation, a lot of these regulations, and there's really a lot more that could be and that needs to be done. If we're going to prevent another crisis from happening.
Yeah. The book, The Occupiers, The Making of the 99% Movement. We've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com how you can pick up Michael Gould Wartofsky's book on the Occupy movement. I appreciate you taking time for us, Michael. Thanks so much for the book. I look forward to talking to you again at some point.
All right, take care.
Let's take a quick break. Back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
From Cambridge, Massachusetts, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Climate negotiators are departing Geneva today after completing an 86-page negotiating text, a draft of what could be signed in December. Throughout the document, there are language options, side paragraphs that give a sense of where the document could veer in the months ahead.
One of the key questions is, what's fair? What is it fair for the United States to do versus Europe?
Jennifer Morgan is the global director of the World Resource Institute's climate program. Some countries, like the U.S., have advocated doing away with distinctions between developed and developing nations, arguing that developing nations like India or China will soon be among the world's largest emitters, and they shouldn't be governed by a different set of rules. On the other end of the spectrum, certain developing countries say they still need to grow, and that past emissions from the developed world are what led us to this unsustainable juncture. But Morgan says there's growing support for striking a balance instead of taking sides.
I think there's a group of countries that are all trying to do their fair share to solve the climate change problem. And that means that the richer countries of the world do a bit more because they are able to. But countries that are just trying to feed their kids need a bit of support to make that happen.
So what about a big overarching goal for the treaty? Reaching zero net carbon emissions is emerging as that target. It's ambitious, but the negotiating text contains two potential end dates. One, the year 2100. The other, merely the latter half of the century. And Morgan says the difference matters.
If you go all the way out to 2100, what the science, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says is, you have a much lower probability of avoiding these climate impacts that just get more and more extreme.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Shouldn't America have at least one major party that is not beholden to the corporate elite? Well, look here. Just such a party has popped up, raring to roar into the 2016 presidential race. Called the KB Party, it has the funding and political punch to bypass the establishment's control of the election system. But don't rush to sign up. KB stands for Koch brothers. Yes, Charlie and David, the multi-billionaire right-wing industrial barons who already own several Congress critters, governors, think tanks, AstroTurf campaign machines, front groups, etc., now have their very own private political party. And it's not beholden to the corporate elite, since it is the elite. The Koch boys have rallied roughly 300 like-minded opponents of democracy to their brotherhood of plutocrats, intent on purchasing a president and Congress that will impose their vision of corporate rule over America. At a secretive retreat in January for KB Party funders, the 300 barons ponied up $900 million for their campaign. That's nearly $200 million more than the combined expenditures of the Republican and Democratic parties in last year's elections. And it's way more than either of those parties will have for 2016. This means that in our nation of 350 million people, a cabal of only 300 of the wealthiest will have the wherewithal to narrow the choice of candidates presented to the rest of us, restrict the range of policy ideas that are proposed to voters, imbue the overall campaign with a negative tone, and, most important, shape the governing agenda of those who get elected. This is Jim Hightower saying the Supreme Court's disastrous Citizens United edict created this mess. To help ban the corporate cash that's clogging our elections and killing our people's democratic rights, go to democracyisforpeople.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
That's why I started giving these speeches. My job is not only commander-in-chief, but educator-in-chief. And I needed to say to the people, you bet it's tough.
Oh, yes, you bet it's tough. You bet it's tough. One of the worst presidents in history. And I like what Brendan Boyle said earlier. It's going to be about 200 or 300 years before Bush is remembered well by the voters. Because, look, I went around today talking to people, everybody I came across, and I do this on days like this, who's your favorite president? And like I said, everybody came out with, nobody had any off the wall. Everybody came out with either Abe Lincoln or George Washington. Because, sadly, I think that's all we learned about it, because those are the faces that are thrown out there for the big blowout sales. And I hope you went out and you took advantage of the big President's Day blowout sales. My email was full of, hey, don't miss your President's Day blowout sale. I'm going, really? Here's an idea. Here's an idea. Why don't we have a day where we actually talk about the president? Just a thought, little education, little thought, little, because I got a couple of emails of people, I can't believe John Adams is your favorite president. And I think I was fairly explicit in my explanation that the main reason and the only reason that he's my favorite president is because he left. That's huge. It's enormous. The first ideological shift of power without blood loss. That's the American, that's the exceptional part of this country. That we can disagree. We can have differing points of view, and I don't have to kill you for being stupid. We don't have to chop each other's heads off because we have different faiths. Although there's a movement of people who want us to be going down that path on both sides of the religion divide. But that's the amazing thing here. That's what makes us exceptional. That's, to me, what made him, in my view, my favorite president. Now, like I said, from a policy standpoint, what he actually, policy-wise, obviously FDR, because of all of the New Deal, all of the things that brought us out of the depths of despair and out of the depths of the Great Depression. And because of him and the groundwork he had laid, a massive expansion of the middle class and a working class that was actually prosperous and not begging at every turn. Now, we're going back to that. And you could argue that's the natural order of the things. The cream rises to the top and screw the rest of you. And you can, I guess, believe that. My grandparents' generation didn't. They believed in hard work. They believed in loyalty. They believed in civility. We're struggling with some of that stuff, which is why I think, the activism that we're seeing from the Occupy folks, the people who've come out of that movement, and the discussion of what do we do with the next generation. I think these things are so important, which is why we talk about them here on the program. And I think it's paramount that we be able to discuss things in a way that, isn't mired in, well, that's your idea and I don't like you, so I'm not going to pursue that. It's nuts. I've always said good ideas are good. Bad ideas are not. Simple. I don't care who comes up with it. And maybe we need to be thinking in those terms. Maybe on this day, remembering John Adams, who for the good of the country, after he lost, and he lost, He walked away and ceded power. That's it. Pretty simple stuff. If you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do enjoy the emails. Thanks for being here on this President's Day, and go out, enjoy the blowout sales. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's color like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, and amorous. Democracy is coming to the U.S.